This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
People have so much to gain and have such an ulterior motive for putting a position on him. We'll never let the true facts come of our boards to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the Grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now these people are in very high positions, Jack. Yes.
Ooh, welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 275. I'm your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khaled.
And today, we are hopping on a little later than we'd planned.
We're working on like a big guest get that we thought we had coordinated for today, but there was a little bit of communication going on, but we have it locked in. It's gonna go down. It's a get we're very excited about. So little bit of housekeeping had to be done, but which is
But
we're
we
here
still
doing a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah, we had a little time left over, so we thought
emergency Q&A with even less prep than usual. But we curated some questions that are both spooky and that we think we can do relatively, off the dome without too much preliminary work.
Exactly.
To the guy, to the guy who said that you're over the YouTube. Well, we will be posting the Zoom audio very shortly after this, so
did they delete
make sure that the audio only version comes out quickly.
Wow,
but
no,
anyway,
I will, inshallah, I'll put it out tonight. But other than that, I guess we can get into it, and we got a couple good questions today from the Grotto Discord, and.
I guess I'll read this one, which I thought this is definitely one I can get into off the dome first.
All right.
So this is from One-Eyed Jax on August 27th, 2022. He asks, I am curious to hear your take on the destruction of the ancient Assyrian statues of Lamassu, reported to be a protection spirit, by ISIS, and all the other relics they have ransacked northern Iraq. What was the purpose of this, as it was obviously not a looting/selling on the black market, etc. scenario, since they literally bulldozed and completely obliterated their relics? They went on a complete destruction bender. And once I found out the Lamassu were used for protection, I started thinking they did it with some occult or magical reasoning. If they were to have just wanted to do it to be disrespectful, one would think they would have stolen what they could have and profited off of it, not destroy it all. So I think there's a couple factors in this decision. I mean, it kind of parallels the Bamiyan Buddhas, a famous thing, involving the Taliban. Yeah, which is a big media firestorm. And as we kind of talked about in our episode about the Taliban with Ibrahim Moyes, that also kind of, and I think this probably was the case with ISIS to an extent as well. That was sort of meant as a rebuke to the culture of UNESCO antiquities preservation, it's sort of seen as this but of course it does factor into an idea of these these are idols. If you think about the Muslim, this standard, kind of a narrative of the emergence of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, this is someone who smashed idols,
an iconoclast.
The Kaaba used to be full with idols, and he went in and smashed them all. And then after he did that, he actually ordered his close companions to go out and seek out these idols according to the sort of early historiography, which some of these stories might be like embellish or whatever, but he ordered his companions to go out and destroy idols of the goddesses who were worshipped in pre-Islamic Arabia. Again, let me clarify. This is not a woman centered society, or like that was great because they worship goddesses. They were famously misogynistic, and they buried their infant daughters alive.
Okay.
But
sure.
again, according to Muslim historiography, but so just because they worship a goddess doesn't mean that they were progressive. But so
yes,
in that way, the destruction of idols is kind of like obviously there's also like a great tradition in Islam of like the Sphinx was never destroyed, even though obviously Muslims have ruled Egypt for many years.
That's a good point. They didn't detonate the pyramids or the Sphinx.
Exactly, yeah. So it's this kind of, it has a performative component that is meant to kind of send a message to the world. And of course, it is also, there's a hypocrisy to it, because even though those statues in particular weren't like sold on the black market, like, the
many
ISIS
others
or the
were.
Islamic State group totally did participate in that, as a lot of these jihadi Salafi groups do. So, but the idea, like, but that's the thing, like, there is this kind of meme of Islamic iconoclasm, and there's actually an interesting book about this. God, I'm forgetting the title, but it's a book about the I believe it's by a Kaplan, and it's about actually the idea of Jewish iconoclasm. And I want to say that it's Kaplan, but like aniconism, is that what it is? It's something like that. But he basically, this author speculates that he suggests that like really like the whole meme of like Jewish aniconism really like started to take off during like kind of like the German like quote unquote Enlightenment with like Kant and with Hegel, like because they were like very fixated on this idea. And if you read those writers, like it is kind of true that they look to the idea of aniconism as being something that like separated the two religions with which Christianity has the most kind of like uncomfortably in common, those like Judaism and Islam, the like these like Semitic religions, from Christianity, was their sort of relationship. So they really fixed it on this idea, and like they made much out of it. And like both like Jewish writers and Muslim, like especially like modernist reformers who are kind of the forebears of the Salafi movement, they like, rather than say like, no, we do have a tradition of like figurative drawing, or no, like, there is like for instance, like, we didn't destroy the Sphinx or whatever. Usually the approach was actually to embrace that idea and to say like, yeah, that's right. Like we are aniconic, and like that's good for this such and such reason. And it, like and many Western writers, obviously like abstraction is like a occurrence in Western art. I talked about this a little bit before, like the idea, like there were people who said that Picasso must have been influenced by his Moorish blood because of his like abstract drawings, So in some like Western art context, abstraction is like, valorized. So like they're like some, you can, it's not necessarily a fundamentally bad thing. So it kind of explains why there was an embrace of this on both sides. So like, like the, I mean, I think we even talked about in The Land Belongs to Whom It Belongs, this whole controversy with the stamps, where T.E. Lawrence like made the stamps for the Kingdom of the Hejaz, and originally the designs, I think it was King Hussein himself who did the designs, or something like that. The designs were basically like Ottoman stamps, which depicted like architectural, buildings. They depicted like, architecture from
representational.
Like, yeah, they were from the Hejaz, I mean, they were architectural, I guess, but like, and that's similar to the Ottoman stamps, they weren't the same, but they did have these architectural, images on them. But T.E. Lawrence was like, that's not authentically Arab enough, so we're going to use abstract patterns, right? And that's the thing, like, like Muslim intellectual cultures and Western intellectual cultures obviously are not really separate. So like this idea did circulate, and by some it was embraced, and obviously like there's a long way from intellectuals who are thinking seriously about things and like ISIS, they're very far apart. But it took a long time for that idea to kind of percolate and in the sort of emphasis on like the strict sense of hadith and kind of and like kind of an unmediated relationship with books like Sahih Bukhari and things like that. This like the idea of like this like destroying idols, gain currency, and the emphasis on Islam's anti-Iconism, but it has gained some currency, and that kind of is a ISIS' destruction of those statues could be seen as an epiphenomenon of that. But maybe I digress a little bit. That's all by way of saying that in the if you do read a book like Sahih Bukhari and you do look at the sort of way in which images were talked about in older works of fiqh or older Islamic jurisprudence or the hadith literature or whatever. There is a connection. The reason why there was any sort of a negative attitude toward images was in a way because of the religious use to which images could be put, right? And and how did, even in fact, if you watch the movie, I know I'm going on a little bit, but if you watch the movie The Message, right, Mustafa Akhad's famous movie about the Prophet Muhammad, which Muhammad isn't in, but it's
interesting challenge.
It is an interesting challenge. But it's an interesting film in a lot of ways. But in that movie, there's this weird scene where the pagans are kind of arguing their case before the king of Abyssinia, because the early Muslims, trying to take shelter with him, and they're trying to say no, you turn them over to him, and turn them back over to us, the pagan Meccans. And they actually have this scene where they kind of explain the idea of idolatry, and it's no, we don't worship the image, we worship the spirit inside the image or whatever. And there's this weird part where he's the king of Abyssinia says I grant that idolatry is not often well understood. I guess maybe that's part of because he's a Christian, but anyway, whatever. The thing is if you look at the way that ancient Egyptians thought about their statues, they thought about figures, things like that. These were they were the god, these weren't just things that the god alighted upon. They actually were iterations of the god's presence, in a very real way, and or a very direct way, a very immediate way. So and if you look at those old stories I talked about, where you have people like my namesake Khalid ibn al-Walid, or Walid, going out to destroy these icons of Manat and Al-Uzza, those in those stories, the idols usually are when he destroys them, an evil demon inside of them, or the spirit that people were worshiping is it's
actually present inside
exactly
of the idol.
It's not that they even though the Quran does sort of mention that these are mute stones that can't speak or can't interact with people, that's sort of one of his big critiques of them. There still is this idea that there is some kind of force inside of them, right? So this is all by way of saying that when one-eyed Jax says is there an occult magical purpose for this, it's not that they are trying to destroy the protection. They, if there is maybe an angle to that, maybe I wouldn't call it occult, but simply religious,
intra-religious,
where they, it might be that, this is exactly what, this is exactly the kind of idol in the kind of context really that Islam, the Quran, opposes very strongly, whether, and there are different interpretations. Some saw it as kind of a misdirection of worship that should be directed toward God, toward stones and things that in the sort of imagination they have a personality, and some saw it as actually directing that worship towards actual beings, but that weren't God, and in fact could be malevolent in some way.
Right. So yeah, there's an interesting distinction there between destroying them because they're fake and they're just a piece of rock that you think is a god. You're worshiping a false idol in the sense of it's literally just not a divine conscious thing at all, versus more of a believing in magic version of that, where they do derive, they are in connection with some kind of spirit, but it's not God, and it's maybe something you shouldn't trust. I guess your mileage varies, but depending on the spirit of the deity. But you're talking, I guess maybe in the Islamic mindset, you'd say these are possessed by jinn, right?
Yeah, you might call them. Yeah, I guess probably they would be considered jinn. It's very actually an interesting question, but I guess jinn is probably how they would be classified if you had to seriously do it. I'm actually curious, like how people might have like a different Muslim writers. They really don't know like how they might have interpreted. I mean, again, it's not like a probative work, so it'll be hard to track this down. It's more of like just like a kind of a collection of stories. It's not like considered like legally or even necessarily like historically probative in terms of like understanding the prophet's life and the aftermath. But like Kitab al-Asnam, like the Book of Idols, where you see some of those stories. I wonder how like the interpretation of that might be, but it may well vary. But yeah, like it's kind of two different interpretations of the Shahada. Like la ilaha illallah, like.
There's no God but God means no other gods exist. Or people do that with the Ten Commandments too. Like you shall worship no other gods before me. And it's like, well, it kind of that leaves the door open. Like there are other quote unquote gods out there.
Right, I mean, this is also, they're not really gods.
They're lesser gods than me. Like I'm the number one god, and they're demigods of some kind, or maybe they're spiritual. Entities.
I mean, I think that like the Shahada is a bit like I think that actually kind of was the point of Islam, because I think that in the sort of pre-Islamic context, when the Quran talks about Allah, like it's kind of understood that like people understand who Allah is. It's not like there is like one being. Like it kind of actually does do that, but it doesn't have to like totally lay out the concept of like of who Allah is, or the idea of like of a supreme God, I guess. Like that concept does seem to be accessible to the Quran's audience. Mm-hmm. So it is kind of like they did kind of have that concept, or at least some of the audience did.
Do you think that's because of the existence of like Judaism and Christianity, or even older traditions that kind of like even polytheistic traditions where there's kind of a pantheon and there's like a supreme God?
Well, yeah,
on top. Right?
I think again, like it is true that like the paganism, like we're like good work is being done in that area now, like working with like kind of inscriptions in the Hijaz, like pre-Islamic inscriptions and things like that. But it's still a very murky area, like what the nature of Meccan paganism was, and some of these revisionist historians actually kind of like deny the existence of Meccan paganism, and like of course naturally people are gonna try to say that like, oh, the Quran like misrepresents them, or like it's not, and like obviously the Quran is in some ways like Quino's like a
highly polemical text.
It is a highly polemical text against those people. So like it's fair enough that like secular historians think that it is.
Yeah.
I do feel like a lot of the time like secular Islamic studies like falls on its face and trying to, everyone knows Patricia Crone and things like that. They like try to chase this like, grand revision that's going to overturn the traditional narrative. And again, they have to admit that, the traditional narrative more or less does hold up, but it doesn't hold up in every way. There are small things that, maybe where, you could modify. But anyway, yeah, that's all by way of saying that. The nature of like Meccan pagan belief is kind of like still, or Meccan polytheist belief, I should say, not to use this sort of a derogatory term, but like it's still very obscure. But certainly, it's absolutely true that there were Christians and Jews like in the context, in that context, who are addressed by the Quran. So certainly, like Christians and Jews were in that environment. There also seem to have been like polytheists, right? The assumption is that those polytheists, they, in the same way that like the Greeks had like Zeus, aka Zeus, right? If you like Homeric Greek, I think it was even kind of pronounced like that, right? Like by Jove and stuff like that, like like there's this kind of idea of like like a supreme god, right? That is like the king of all the gods or whatever, and then there's like one god below. So like when Allah talks about himself in the Quran, like that audience probably did have a sense of who Allah was, but there was this their sense, I guess, was a little bit wrong, because they were seeing him maybe as like a high god and not as like the god.
Right, yeah.
But that's like generally like that's like the kind of assumption that seems to be the case.
Okay.
Whereas
Can I pose you a question, bringing it back a little bit to ISIS and their destruction of artifacts? Because I'm curious to know what you think about this, because they didn't just destroy Yazidi or Akkadian or quote unquote, polytheistic or pagan idols. Like they also went after like Christian, buildings and iconography, and crucially Muslim iconography. Let me just read a few of the things that they destroyed that are, Islamic, either somewhat sacred or very historical sites. In the Islamic tradition. I guess I'm just looking through the Wikipedia, the destruction of artifacts Wikipedia for ISIL. And I guess in 2014, they allegedly bombed the tomb of Ibn al-Athir, the Imam Abbas Mosque in Mosul, the Sheikh Jawad al-Sadiq Mosque, the tomb of Sayyid al-Mahmud Baba, Hamu al-Qadu Mosque, the Martyrs Mosque, Saad ibn Aqil Shrine in Tal Afar, the Sufi Ahmed al-Rafai Shrine, and Sheikh Ibrahim's Shrine in the Malabiya district. They also targeted several tombs with shrines built over them. They destroyed one of the tombs of the prophet Daniel and the tomb and mosque of the prophet Jonah with explosives, as well as the tomb of prophet George. Then they also destroyed the 13th century mausoleum of Imam al-Din in Mosul, one of the few structures to have survived the 13th century Mongol invasion, mostly carried out with explosives, but in some cases bulldozers were used. September 2014, the Al-Arba'in Mosque in Tikrit, containing 40 bombs from the Umar era, or 40 tombs, from the Umar era, was blown up. The building also contained 2 shrines. Let's see. Then they blew up the 12th century Green Mosque in central Mosul. In 2015, they bulldozed the Hamu al-Qadu Mosque in Mosul, dating back to 1880.
Yeah.
Like they.
Well, I mean, it's obvious like what the reasoning is, which is that a lot of those places, most of those places are like Shia sites based on the name, and some of them are Sufi shrines, right? And as we talked about in the show before, Sufism is like, was very much a part of like quote unquote orthodox mainstream Islamic practice for like centuries, right? It was like very much like part of, for instance, like the Ottoman landscape of Islam, right? As we talked about in the Land Parts of Belongs and other contexts as well. But that is like a big again, Salafism, which you can kind of, again, don't want to make too much out of it because this is like a pretty heterogeneous movement, and in a way that like its heterogeneity is downplayed by a lot of people who talk about it. But you can still draw a line. Like ISIS is in the Salafi tradition, right? They're not. They are about these people who are trying to argue for ijtihad, in the Ottoman context, right? Like they kind of they're closer to being the heirs of Rashid Rida or Muhammad Abduh than they are of Yusuf al Nabhani or something like that. Yusuf al Nabhani. So like they are they're obviously, I don't think it's going to be controversial to say like the ISIS are fundamentalists, right? Like, but yeah, they're also kind of like the reform, like the Salafi movement is a fundamentalism and reformist, right? And one of their biggest targets was like what was mainstream Sufi piety, things like, and you can even see this if you're on Muslim Twitter, you'll see people fighting about Mawlid, like the celebration of the Prophet's birthday, right? Okay. But that's the bid'ah and innovation, right? Because obviously the Prophet didn't celebrate his own birthday, right? That was introduced after, so that's not the way of the Prophet's community. So therefore, like this practice that is like totally harmless and that people have has been a part of Islam for centuries, like and if you go to the extreme, if you're totally extremist like ISIS, then it's like, people need to be killed over doing this. Or, when it comes to something like Shi'ism, obviously ISIS is probably more opposed to Shia than anybody. Probably they would put Shia, in terms of who they hate and who they want to destroy, they put Shi'ism probably in front of anybody, because it's the internal threat. Which of course is nonsense. Like obviously, just to make clear, I really repudiate all sectarianism.
Well, when exactly did that, like the, I guess what would you call it, the takfir on Shias as, as basically like I forget what they called them, the Rafida or something like that.
The Rafida, yeah.
Rafida, they basically declared them like apostates, and then it's open season on them. Like when did that? Because like, correct me if I'm wrong, but even in a lot of like the Salafi traditions in the early 20th century or even mid 20th century, it doesn't seem like, I'm sure there are like doctrinal disagreements and stuff, but it doesn't seem to be this kind of like exterminationist kind of attitude towards Shias that
I mean,
ISIS
obviously,
adopts kind of a little conveniently, I would say.
obviously there were people who expressed those ideas, like, throughout history, like it's not like something that like no one had ever suggested before like, the 19th century. But that's the thing, like once you like there was this feeling, as we talked about, that, and a feeling that persists to this day, that the Islamic world was basically like had fallen behind. Islam, which was largely identified with the Ottoman Empire, but also, in Iran and in India and in other places, right? There is a sense that Islamdom had fallen behind Christendom, right? It fallen behind the West, and that is humiliating. It was disgraceful, and this is something that like we still feel, right? So why, like we need to change things, right? And so some people were like, oh, like it's all these bid'ahs that we've introduced, like we've actually gotten away from like, the prophet's practice, right? And that's why we're being, that's why we're so far behind, because like we have all these, basically it's very, very similar to what we were just talking about with the Cockland Ghost and what we were talking about the Rosicrucians, it's, if you're going to like, it's a funny thing where people are like, Islam needs a reformation, it's like, well, actually that did happen. Like more or less the closest thing to a reformation you're going to get, it's like that's the rise of Salafism, the rise of this fundamentalist reformist movement. So yeah, like then they're targeting these superstitions that have infiltrated Islam, like things like Mawlid, that's going to be a superstition. Things like the veneration of graves, right? Because that's there's kind of was a this is like a cultural analogy that's like not perfect, but there kind of was a cult of the saints in Islam, the same way there is in Catholicism, right? And that involved like making pilgrimage to saints' tombs, like great spiritual personalities. That's why they destroyed those tombs,
right?
Because like they associate them with this practice of grave visitation that has such, and the memory of that practice still lives, right? And it was like this very destructive bid'ah that was targeted by those people as like this horrible superstition that's like it's the same way like if you had like radical if you had imagine like Anabaptists destroying like a Catholic shrine or something, right? Like they would do like worshiping some saints, or digging up the grave of Saint Gwynethford or something, even even within
the dogs,
right? Yeah.
No, it makes sense.
Skullbong says Wahhabism. Yeah, I mean Wahhabism. Like that's the thing too. Saudi has like their government, they like actually have destroyed tons of historical sites all across the Hijaz, right? Like they've destroyed like sites associated with Imam Ali or Ali ibn Abu Talib, and they've destroyed like Khadija's house, things like that, like because of this like anxiety around like tomb visitation, this anxiety. Like we talked in one earlier episode, I think it was in the Land Belongs to Whom It Belongs series, like we talked about Shahab Ahmed's book, What is Islam? And he like talks about how the whole landscape of the Hijaz that people visited as pilgrims for centuries is completely transformed by this kingdom, because they demolished all these sites that were like venerated for centuries and centuries by Muslims. But anyway, so when did this like phenomenon start? Like that's the thing. Once you go like look back, you're like, let's go back to the fundamentals here, right? And you're trying to reinterpret these sources, not based on like, that's the thing. Like in like Islamic jurisprudence, like the conservatism of that, even though like it was conservative and it was resistant to change, it did serve a purpose in a way because it was kind of the fossilized social solutions that people had arrived at based on actual emergent situations. But like in this kind of like really, and a lot of this like came out of like a total chaos, like actual like political like like devastation, like things like World War I and like the colonization of the entire Muslim world, not the entire Muslim world, but like the entire landscape, like much of the former Ottoman world, right? It was like split up by Europe and this very European powers in this very brutal way. So like in that like devastating and like disorienting context, like you're going back to the fundamentals of the religion, right?
Of course, yeah.
Like this, it kind of encouraged. Now, of course, those things that exist before. You have the Ottoman Wahhabi War and stuff like that. But I mean, and some of those groups actually were sponsored and encouraged, right, by the European, as we talked about a lot, and as many people know, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean,
but,
that's that's the thing about the ISIS destruction that like susses me out the most, is like their total dedication to wiping out like pretty much, I guess, everybody that's not Sunni. They're destroying all of their like religious monuments and like all of this heritage shit going back to like the Roman Empire, like Palmyra and things like that.
Even Sunnis as well. Sunnis who don't practice as they believe should be the case, right?
Only a certain spectrum of Sunni.
Basically, their
Sunnism
idea of this. I kind of sound like Obama or something right now, but like their very narrow idea of Islam is like the only one that's acceptable, which is of course, a very uneducated, like vulgar concept, and like a lot of these people who are in ISIS, like. It's the same with a lot of people who a lot of them are foreign fighters, don't have connection to to Syria, to Iraq.
Right.
They come in, they just want to, many people who are foreign fighters, who leave their comfort of the foreign countries to come.
Just want to blow shit up, really.
Yeah, they just want to blow shit up. They just want to kill.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the ideology is kind of secondary. That's definitely
Right.
true for a lot of people in that group.
And it does disturb me to think, truly in the broader context, like cui bono from all of this like cultural erasure that ISIS was like carrying out. Because I wouldn't argue that it's like the ummah of like the the great Sunni masses in the Middle East that really like benefit from it. And in fact, it kind of sets them up for a backlash when the other groups, every other group has had their shit kind of destroyed, and they too are victims to like a certain extent. So there's only like maybe, I don't know, I think there's the Western powers, then maybe like one other country that might really love for this to happen. And I think is it too crazy to think that there's just a little too much convenience, like a convergence of interests here to kind of a turn, in terms of cultural heritage, like turn as much of the Middle East into a parking lot as they can so that they could build something new over it one day, or
I mean, that's like what it has happened in the case of like Saudi, they are like building like Neom, but have destroyed like all these,
or the great plans for the new Gaza, super city. And like when you think about Israel, the weird phenomenon of ISIS being so fucking hardcore and extreme towards like everybody that isn't the perfect like Salafi, whatever they've come up with, and then just like conveniently never attacks Israel. Like ever. Like, I mean, it is ever. Is there one fucking attack ever?
It's their official like belief that Israel is a lower priority than apostates or than Shia, or who they deem to be apostates or Shia. Like they believe Shia are worse than Israel. Like that is like officially their stance.
And that to me is such an insane belief that like it just throws up so many like red flags for me. Considering like
red flags.
Who are these guys really? These Camp Buka graduates that come out with this like the most geopolitically convenient for NATO version of the Salafi Islam ever. That like targets all of like the geopolitical enemies of the West and other minorities, tries to wipe out other minorities, and kill lots of Muslims in the process, and then just like conveniently forget to ever do anything with their scary capabilities, like to go after Israel in Israel or anywhere else in the world. And you just and then Israel, despite all of them going on all day about the terrorists and Hamas and everything else and Iran, they're so dangerous. Like it's almost been like an open secret that Israel has never been too angry that ISIS fights Iran so hard. They're on the same side on that front, right? Like they're both extremely anti-Iranian, anti-Hezbollah. And, like I do wonder, was there a little Mossad collab in the development of what would become ISIS
Mossad
or its
definitely
leadership?
Has tried to stoke sectarian feeling on many occasions, because
classic
of course it is
divide
true.
and conquer.
Yeah, like Hezbollah, they're Shia, and Iran obviously is Shia, so they have definitely not in secret, openly tried to promote like sectarian messages. Like they have like Mossad like officers like making like public statements to this effect. So it definitely is a thing, and like
Yeah.
not to not to suggest that they're like I was seeing recently, I think I want to say was it Ted Cruz who like said something that like Mossad is such an amazing intelligence agency that like we need to give all this money to Israel because then in exchange they let us have access to the brilliant capabilities of Mossad, which is just so far beyond anything that we do. Not to say that, but I mean, like they obviously
it could easily be in collab with the CIA.
They obviously
and others
are like
too.
a very competent intelligence agency, that was able to infiltrate Iran very effectively. They were able to pull these things off that were, very devastating.
Right,
So,
right. I mean, we
like
know
they
that
are
there's
capable of other things, like in the sort of soft domain as well.
right.
And
Like during
yeah,
the
I mean,
Iraq
like,
War, they kept a very low profile. The Israelis in terms of like their they didn't like formally participate in the 2003 Iraq War, but I would find it like impossible that like Mossad people weren't kind of quietly like going in and out of Iraq and like consulting or partnering with the U.S. forces in a variety of ways. And then there's the whole insurgency going on. Like given how tight the U.S. and Israel are, and this is during the George W. Bush years. They must have been kind of I'm not saying that's like like the Mossad went into Camp Bucca and like brainwashed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. I mean, the Americans they're the ones that invaded and occupied the country, so they had all kinds of opportunities to fuck with people and do stuff. And even there was the reports, very well buried reports in the late 2000s where there were people alleging that one of the Kurdish parties in Iran, I forget if we didn't quite get to this or hadn't read it yet in our like Sus Mormon kind of Middle East episode, but one of these groups is basically like an affiliate of the PKK, just like the YPG is.
Yeah,
like
we talked about this.
They're all the same thing. And but I'd found some like interesting tea that there were allegations that Mossad was providing weapons and training to like this, Kurdish group, maybe around 2006, 2007, when I guess certain people in the Bush administration were still angling to have a war with Iran back then and using like local proxies to like spark an uprising. And so they seemed like they were very busy working with like proxies and trying to figure out like what groups could we strategically back to fuck up Iran, and then kind of look like it has nothing to do with us. Like, oh, look, the Kurds are just rising up. Oh, look, ISIS. Wow, they must hate us. Wink, wink. Like, and yet they never attack them.
I mean, I definitely see what you're saying, and like definitely that is practically speaking true that like these like. And I think that like probably the anti-Iran component, or like the sort of divide and conquer element in this sort of sectarian landscape is more effective. I mean, like just to like nuance it a little bit, like it is like Skullbong brought up Wahhabism. I'm reminded of this novel that was written like in the 1930s, 1933. That like is, let me make sure I have the date right. It's called the Book of Khalid, actually. Again, another namesake of me. Sorry, it's 1911. I don't know why I said 1933. And that doesn't make any sense with what I'm even about to say, because this, obviously like the time period is relevant as well. Maybe it's the author's death date that I'm thinking of. He died in 1940, but anyway, so it's by like a Lebanese Christian, Amin Rahani, who was actually the first like major Arab writer in English, like in the United States. And this book, the Book of Khalid, is kind of like semi-autobiographical in certain ways, and you really do see like in the book, maybe I've even mentioned it before because I've definitely made this point before, that like he's very invested in the idea of Islam. He's very invested in the idea of Islam as like a national identity, or like something that he, as like an Arab, like Lebanese guy, has like a stake in, even though he's Christian, right? And you see this who we talked about in The Land Belongs to Me, some of his diary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like there's this one sort of part of the novel, which of course is fictional, but it like is about kind of like his feelings with the direction of like the Muslim world, and like he really believes in like or in the Ottoman world, and he really believes in this like idea of reform, right? And he in the novel he imagines basically the author imagines himself, and the protagonist of the novel actually does give a speech, in the I want to say, like, is it in the Hagia Sophia? I think it might be in the Hagia Sophia. But either way, like in a big mosque, in Istanbul,
Mm-hmm.
and he like is saying about the need for like to reform, it's the real spirit of Islam, to like, and he kind of portrays like this like bigoted crowd, being like, oh no, he's a Wahhabi, and he's like, yes, that's right, like I'm like a proud like Wahhabi, and like it is like, but like Wahhabism is the only way forward, like whereas now like Wahhabi is almost exclusively a pejorative term, even like like hard like people who are basically like your stereotypical Wahhabi like wouldn't want to be called that usually.
Yeah.
But like back then, like it was almost something that someone who like imagined themselves at least were the idea, like this was someone he was very he was actually very, very active in the early like anti-Zionist movement in the United States. This is author Amin Rahani. This was someone who obviously envisioned himself as like progressive, envisioned himself as not like a traitor to the Arab world. In fact, he had like a lot of conflicts with other early American Arab intellectuals over like kind of the partition of Ottoman Syria, right? Because Lebanon at that time was a part of like Ottoman Syria, and like there were some who wanted their own Lebanese state, and there were some who wanted to remain part of Syria, and they, like here's a big conflict between the pan-Syrian kind of group and others, and he was more of a pan-Arabist, this author, but so he was like kind of like generally like had a level-headed perspective, definitely saw himself as progressive, and you can kind of like it.
Yeah, no, I
definitely
see what
was
you
a
mean,
thing
yeah.
where like people, but obviously he was influenced by like the, he lived in New York
Right.
and everything. So like he was influenced by like the West and Western ideas and things like that, and like he was,
Right.
thinking like,
It wasn't
how do we
always
get
what
at
it
this?
is, what it
Exactly.
sort of means
And like, but
today.
that, ended up opening like with everything that we talked about, like in the intervening history, all of the devastation that happened, all of the nightmare of the 20th century, right? Like that, like impulse, which was like, okay, well, we got to go back to the purity, like then that ends up
It
like,
makes sense.
leading to this thing where you have people who like aren't like, like for whatever you want to say about like traditional like Islamic jurists, like, and they're, not all of them were like, great or like even like intellectually gifted per se. Like a lot of them like were kind of like moribund and things like that, but like also like they were highly like well read, like they studied this stuff and like were like deeply involved in it. We were writing like volumes and volumes on it, like they understood like what they were dealing with. And then there's this kind of thing where people who like don't know, like it's kind of, this is like a again, I'm talking off the dome here, and like it's a kind of a cheap thing to reduce it to, but and it also kind of like proves the point about like it kind of I wish I could do something from the Islamic intellectual tradition and not from like like some Western like Christian apologist, but like it's like Chesterton's fence in a way, like
What is that?
like
I mean, G.K. Chesterton.
yeah.
Okay.
He had this idea that like the like it was kind of an allegory for like conservatism or like the value of tradition. It's like before you try to take down a fence, you have to explain to me why the fence was built in the first place. Because if you take it down without understanding that, then bad things could happen. You like, all the rabbits will come into the. That's probably what he said. The rabbits will come into. That's a very like fat British man problem to have.
Yeah,
but, like,
they hate rabbits. They hate the rabbits.
But no. I mean, I got to give him his credit. This is a good point. I think
it's a fair point.
and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that like that fence, if you're talking about like the real Sunni tradition that had existed for centuries, that fence was taken down. And I think that obviously you can talk about like the Mossad side and like the
Yeah, well, that's
how much
more
is the psyop
specifically
side,
ISIS.
but also
like,
yeah. But like this, and it is kind of an on top, like this whole like thing that kind of happened. You can talk about it in those terms, but like the like is still it's important context like for how we got to this point where like groups like that are possible.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Skullpunk's latest question is not one that we're going to address.
Yeah, we will.
But it's nice to see people who don't know.
Yeah, but it's okay.
But,
It's
yeah.
a valid question. But maybe we should move on to our next one, which is from Half Made Up on August 25th, 2022. They ask, the recent release of the new Game of Thrones prequel show has reminded me that I was curious if there was an SJ take on George R.R. Martin. He's most famous for the Song of Ice and Fire novels, which were made into Game of Thrones. In amongst all the fantasy stuff, is a lot of SJ adjacent topics come up, at least in the books. These include deliberately inducing dissociative identity disorder through abuse, forced doses of psychoactive drugs, secret societies, political assassinations, and, arguably, dogmen. The Weirwoods, the magical trees in the story, are named after Bob Weir. George is apparently a huge deadhead. Furthermore, in the books, dragons are described as fire-made flesh, which sounds a lot like gin to me. Of his other works, Of his other works really stand out The Armageddon Rag, a novel about a rock band that is being manipulated into performing an occult ritual as part of a reunion tour. That's actually interesting.
Yeah.
And Fever Dream, a novel about vampires who are depicted as a separate humanoid species and which also contains a depiction of child sacrifice. His family background is definitely not one of the great American fortunes, so I would more lean towards him being a Pynchon-style revealer rather than being sus himself. So, is George R.R. Martin sus? Also, LOL, just occurred to me that all caps SJ question would make a good CIA cryptonym. It kind of would, actually. It does sound like
it's
that.
true. Yeah.
Operation SJ question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
True,
like
yeah.
something incredibly evil.
Yeah.
Interesting. You actually don't know the background. I mean, I would say it just about the, him not being from a great American fortune background. So you'd lean towards him being a Pynchon guy, but like Pynchon is from a great American fortune background and he's a revealer. So I think sometimes, one doesn't necessarily mean, one is a revealer or not. But let's actually see with George R.R. Martin. It's not too often you have two middle names, right? But George Raymond Richard Martin, let's see, from Bayonne, New Jersey. Let's see what kind of milieu he's sprang from. The American Tolkien. He is Catholic, apparently. Oh, okay. So it's actually his confirmation name, which I would assume that he is probably Catholic. Let me see. Yeah. He's son of a longshoreman.
Yeah.
And he's kind of, working class man. Oh, actually, no, hold on. Sorry, it complicated, actually. Son of longshoreman, Raymond Collins Martin, and Margaret Brady Martin. His mother's family had once been wealthy, owning a successful construction business, but lost it all in the Great Depression. Something Martin was reminded about every day when he passed what used to be his family's dock and house. He is predominantly Irish. So he's like a sort of
he did a DNA test
petty bourgeois Irish, but was ruined by the Great Depression and bumped down a few rungs on the class ladder. So he's interesting.
I mean, I feel like it's interesting. Like, I always found I don't really know the Armageddon Rag or the other one that was mentioned, the Fever Dream, but I feel like was it the Fever Dream? Fever Dream, I guess. But yeah, like I always found Game of Thrones to be a little bit sus. One thing that bothered me about it was that it was like, oh, this was just like what history was like. Like everyone was just constantly being raped and doing committing incest all the time. And I feel like that's not true.
I can
obviously,
sympathize with
in
that
the same way that
depiction up to a
incest
point.
and violence happens now, obviously, and rape happens now. It did happen in history, but it wasn't like, historical accuracy means constant,
psychopathic
bloodshed,
murder,
violence, and psychopathy.
and
Yeah, exactly, and the absolute, worst of humanity. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm trying to think back over Game of Thrones. I remember
Did you watch the show or ever read the books?
Yeah. I never read the books. No, I watched the show.
I probably watched the whole show, but maybe I missed one of the seasons that was later where they were making it up as they went along. But maybe I at least like
based on
casually
his notes,
watched
I think,
it.
right? Yeah, like,
Yeah.
you know, they were kind of riffing, but yeah, it was still based on his outline because he hasn't finished the book still,
Right,
which is
right.
a funny thing.
Yeah, he
but
went to
he constantly
Northwestern,
promises that he'll be able to do it. But
He was a
never.
conscientious objector to the Vietnam draft and went to Northwestern University's journalism school. And then I got an MS in journalism after that at Northwestern, and then started selling sci-fi stories. Yeah, I mean, so he's a proper boomer, and was in this kind of sci-fi fantasy novel writing world like pretty much his entire adult life. I watched the whole show, but I think I kind of liked it when it first came out in whatever it was, like 2009.
Yeah.
And maybe like the first like 2 seasons of it. But then by the time, I think around the time of like the Red Wedding, where everyone's like, oh my God, this show is so crazy. Like they killed all the main characters and blah, blah, blah. Like I think I started, as it reached like escape velocity, kind of similar to like how I felt about Breaking Bad, where I really was like, I really liked it, was rooting for it. Like when it had, the first season that was like 6 episodes, I was like, oh, this is like fresh and interesting. And then by the time it was like, say my name, I'm Wotan. It's like, all right, like calm down, everybody. Like people just started getting like chuggy about it, and it was like
it did
kind
become
of annoying.
a bit chuggy. Like the final season of I did kind of like
I mean, I watched
Breaking Bad
but
the whole way, and like it is pretty like it holds up okay, but like especially like that era was like rough. But yeah, I also feel like Game of Thrones definitely did get to the point of being kind of like what people thought like The Sopranos was like, not to be like endorsing The Sopranos, but it was kind of like who's gonna get whacked this week,
right, which is always like the incorrect way to like look at The Sopranos. But like people wanted it to be like the Godfather, but like it was like a weird dark comedy about like modern American life or something, but of like, oh, Tony's gonna whack him, like it didn't really fit onto like what the show was. But then I think Game of Thrones, maybe especially when they started having to put together their own like kind of put together the storyline at the end, I feel like it got maybe a little more like audience captured. This is also the era of like peak Marvel, like peak kind of fandom, like poptimism culture, where
it definitely went in that direction. I remember like I admit like I have this one friend who's like really into that stuff, and kind of like a chuggy in that way. If you're listening, I apologize. I like trolled him a little bit, pretending to like really enjoy the final season of Game of Thrones, and like came up with ways to like defend the decisions. Like,
because he hated it.
I apologize for that.
So
yeah, like that was mischievous of me, but yeah, I mean, like, but yeah, no, it was very much that type of like kind of like fandom, like kind of like the lore and like all these things.
Yeah. So I felt also because I felt the way that the so-called like golden age of TV started, kind of in the 2000s, and then the way it was kind of ending or coming to the way it started to wane by the end of the 2010s was like we started off with like. I know it's like all like white male anti-hero, like yeah, of course that was a trope, but like it was something that TV hadn't really like done as much before, of like trying to sort of match movies in terms of like there was a kind of flip where movies went from on average being more serious to television being more like that's where you go for like more, I don't know, social commentary or things like like Mad Men was like commenting on like the the Eisenhower era and like that kind of shit, and with a critical eye in a way that like movies were increasingly going the Marvel direction. But then as like the decade went on and the streamers, like the Silicon Valley streamers got into the game, it started to like kind of like both slopify itself and also go towards the same spectacle that was happening in like the Marvel movies. So by the end of it, like the big event of like final season Game of Thrones was like just this kind of like you have to love it because you're a fan, and like it sucks. It definitely has fallen off, but like you're not really allowed. I mean, people I guess did get mad at it,
I mean,
but
and like
it was drowned
also
out by.
Yeah, and that's also kind of like the show itself, like which is like a little bit different from George R.R. Martin. Like I think in terms of I can only really speak to. I never read the books, I gotta say, but so I can only really speak to like my experience with the show. But I do think it's a little bit sus that like I don't know, like I said, my original point I stand by that, like I think, and I do agree that it is very much like a reaction to Tolkien. It's almost like where it's almost like kind of like like Wicked, where it's like, oh, what if the Wicked
devil
Witch
was
of
the
the
bad
West was
guy.
really innocent? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or it's like twisted fairy tales, where it's like, kind of like, and it is true. Like Tolkien, I still want to do a sus Tolkien episode because in terms of who's sus, I
Right.
find Tolkien and like certainly like its consequences, like in terms of like American culture and like the cult around Tolkien, to be much more sus than like Game of Thrones. Like, and I understand like that essay by China Mielville, I think, Epic Pooh. I think he's the author of that.
Okay. Oh, Epic
Which like
Pooh.
it's like kind of like a critique of Tolkien, like kind of calling it like poo, kind of just like lulls you into this like soporific state. It's a childish story ultimately, and it is kind of this a romance of like kings and queens and chivalry and everything, must remain as as it is, and it's like fundamentally like fascist, but like and like obviously like I'm religious, I'm not like against like the like that aspect of the things, like I know like Tolkien's very popular with Catholics because he was a traditional Catholic or whatever, but I don't know, I find I'm totally digressing now because I'm getting a totally different book, but I think that George R. R. Martin kind of went too far in the opposite direction, where he was like, oh, like, well, let's talk about what history was really like, where everyone was like fucking their brother and
Sick
sister. It's like,
fucking
no,
freak.
like they like, come on, they. I would be more interested. Of course, this would never be like a show, or it would not be a successful fantasy novel. But I mean, if you read like actual medieval literature, like it's both more interesting than that, and something that would never be like made into a show. But like it does reflect like the values like of the time, including the elite values, and it's not like and even like what they say about their enemies, right? Like it's kind of like you could say like, oh, maybe like there's sort of like polemical descriptions of obscene violence and things like that. For instance, like that type of thing, like what you see, like there. I don't know. I just think like it's like what.
Well, yeah. What do you think is the downside to portraying? I guess like I'm sort of posing this like semi-rhetorically, but I'm curious, like what do you think specifically is the downside of portraying kind of like medieval aristocrats and elites as like incestuous, sociopathic, like murderous freaks? Like, because
I think that there's a couple of things that bother me about it. First of
Okay.
all, I think that there's like a libidinal like enjoyment and delight in this, like this kind of like sex and violence. Like I think that there's like this kind of like libidinal like identification with it that happens. Like
I wouldn't
and
disagree.
like it's kind of this like gladiatorial aspect of it, and that's like that typical gore take. That's one level of it. On the other one, I think that like I mean like. The other one is just simply like a pedantic thing where it's like I don't think it's an accurate representation. Like there's dragons flying around and stuff. Like it's it's obviously not like the fact that people were like would defend it and say like, but that's what history was like. It's like, well,
Right.
people also just live like totally boring lives, including like some kings and queens. Like, and I also like think that there's I would be interested to see like a more accurate depiction of like intrigue or something where like people aren't like getting like poisoned and killed every single week, but it's like it's kind of like
Well,
I
of
mean,
course, there's the narrative economy of like television that kind of needs to like promise a certain level of that shocking. You're going to get a more compressed, like unless it is trying to be a hard historical kind of thing. I mean, he did partially base.
it's
the
like
sort
it's
of
supposed to be like the War of the Roses.
the War of the
right?
Roses and stuff, and there's like things that you could point to in like medieval history for just one example of the Mongol invasions where they slaughter whole cities and drawing and quartering people in England. Like there you can kind of pick examples of this type of behavior, the Inquisition, like things like that, of like some brutal shit going on. And elites were they weren't quite marrying their brothers and sisters all the time, but they definitely were marrying their cousins to like a kind of shocking degree across different kingdoms.
That's very
to the point where they're all related.
Yeah.
And
cousin marriage
I mean,
basically is like pretty normal, especially like among aristocrats.
Right.
Yeah.
And the kind of like sick, like border. So in a way, you could see he's like kind of drawing attention to the incestuous nature of the elites by making it like a twin brother and sister, like going at it. And but I take your point that I don't think the defense of Game of Thrones is like that. This is actually what fucking history was. That's not a strong defense for the show or the books, because like they are fantasized, like they're amped up, and like it takes place in a universe with dragons and like the type of magic that we don't exactly
and, like,
have here.
There's like a spectacle of like the violence and cruelty that I think like and I'm not like people, I don't think this should be taken as like a defense of like the, the mores or the culture of like any like actual medieval or early modern society, or again, like I think a big aspect of this is that like, our contemporary society, these things definitely occur as well, and in fact, the society that we live in now is the most violent society in history, but like, the violence is often invisibilized and exported to other parts of the world. But it's the most like brutal and savage violence that like we've ever seen in the history of humanity is right now. But that's not to say that like I'm defending like the violence that happened in the past, but I also think that there is this kind of like and I'll get to the third thing that I think is wrong about it in 1 second, but it's saying the second thing, like, I think there is this kind of idea of, like, the Dark Ages, like,
that's the
superstition and the sword ruled.
Oh, okay.
And, everything was, and then the great light of science came, and it's, like, this kind of, and, like, any medievalist will, like, criticize this, and I think that's very true, and, like, it's not to say that, like, the medieval world was good. That's kind of like the Tolkien thing of like, if only we could go back to the kings and like and all that stuff, like and the great Aragorn and like stuff like that, like that's like the kind of reactionary kind of like romantic take on it. But like I also think that it does like obscure historical reality in a way that is like just on a fundamental level just like wrong and like not helpful to anybody, and just like makes it into like I just don't think it's good to have a bad understanding of like our own past. I don't know.
I mean, it'd be nice if we could do actual historical things that are like based on
or if
real
there's any
things
educational value to what we were watching on television
with orcs.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that I have to, and I again, like he didn't finish the book series, so in a way, like I don't know how much to pin on Martin himself, but certainly the showrunners. Wasn't it like Damon Lindelof, or am I thinking of other people that?
No,
the Game of Thrones guy is related to the Salesforce CEO.
And
I know
very
that.
fact that like those two guys like read that like first scene and were like, we got to make this into a show on HBO. Like that's I don't know, that's fucked up. Like come on.
Yeah, it was Benny.
Like,
was it Benioff?
Oh, they kill a
Mark
kid
Benioff?
and their brother and sister were fucking. Like
they love it. I mean, HBO loves being edgy. That was their brand. But like the one thing that like really bothered me is like for whatever that I feel like undercuts whatever you could say positively about depicting these sort of medieval elites as like just like sick freak fucking sicko psychopaths, is that like the last like I don't know 2 or 3 seasons, ultimately all of that gets kind of tossed aside because of the existential threat of like the White Walkers, who are literally just like the ooky spooky other barbarian bad guy, like demonic. Nothing's good about them. They're like a sus other like race of like spirit being, and only like the true blooded, like Jon Snow, like the true blooded heir to like his house can like forge the magic weapon that can like fucking beat them. Like it gets into kind of just like a Lord of the Rings gets into like the orcs territory of like there's just a kind of threat that's just that evil.
It's kind of like
it smooths out all the problems of all the existing the flawed
like a slightly
rulers.
woker version of orcs, because like they're literally like they're white.
They're white
orcs.
walkers.
Instead of being
I'd see
orcs,
through
they're
it.
just like obscenely racist.
They need to build a wall, right, to like keep them out, because all they do is just come and destroy everything.
Well, that's the thing about like medieval literature. Like that's like when you're talking about dogmen. Like the idea of like, if you go far enough, you're gonna see people who have dogs for heads and monsters with like teeth in their stomach and stuff like that, and like 100-headed people. Like it's that's like what you see. Like you see, like the enemy being like totally dehumanized all the time, or people from foreign places being like totally and turned into like here be dragons, here be monsters, that type of thing, and like
And the
that does
dragon
pass
thing
into
too.
fantasy literature.
Like the
in
dragon
a big
has like
way.
weird reptoid, like only the true bloodline can like command like the dragon and like rule over everyone, but it's like literalized to like you're actually flying a dragon around. But it's like, but then the way the romance that the Game of Thrones series has with fucking the Dracarys, like, and it's like shut the fuck up, like. I don't know, like it's a bunch of rich people with a fucking dragon, like cool. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's like these rich sickos all got nuclear weapons and like we're
I mean,
supposed
it
to applaud
is
it.
ultimately just like a Game of Thrones where like it's a comp. It's not like they create like a republic in the end or something.
You're right.
It's
It doesn't
just
end
like,
with a really positive,
well,
like
the good royals win.
the relatively good royals.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Same thing that happens in Lord of the Rings, really.
Because she has an
But, like,
indigenous intermarriage with Khal Drogo, and that makes her kind of like low key woke, even though she's like a psytrance, like a Icelandic psytrance queen. Like she becomes whatever group
Well,
the
here's-
Khal Drogo led. I forget their name right now.
Here's my I don't know. Like I would like to see like even like a poem like Orlando Furioso, which like is certainly not like you know like woke in any way, or like it is like definitely has like regressive attitudes in it, but like that poem, which was like written in the 16th century, I think, let me make sure, yeah, 16th century, early 16th century, like that has like more nuance in it than like anything in Game of Thrones. Like it obviously is of its time, but it's almost like less racist than like Lord of the Rings is, but also like it's like interesting, and like I just feel like I don't know, like I think that like Game of Thrones is just ultimately like very pulpy. It doesn't like even something like In the Name of the Rose, I felt like was more interesting in terms of like a representation of like a medieval society, like kind of like a fantasy novel. I don't know, like I just feel like is yeah like
You think it'd be better if people leaned more into doing like historical fiction rather than like fantasy that happens to like map onto a historical period, but then can take all the liberties it wants?
Okay, this is what I want to ask. What is the point of Game of Thrones? What is the Game of Thrones supposed to like contribute to the world?
What does it tell us about the world, about the human experience?
Like, well, yeah, like what does George R. R. Martin want people to take away from Game of Thrones?
The world is incredibly corrupt. Like the people ruling the world are very corrupt, and they're all psychopaths, and they fight with each other. History is basically like these different houses and families.
But is that the point? Because is Jon Snow a psychopath?
No, he's like one of the few like
Is
relatively
Ned Stark
good
a
people.
psychopath?
No,
They're
there's a couple
nobles.
relatively like based nobles that are kind of like meant to rise up and like redeem this entire system by being like wise monarchs, kind of leaders. Like the wise philosopher king. Just like Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. The return of the king. Makes it all okay. And then he
human
beats the big
spirit
bad
of
guys at the
Lord.
end, and then he restores it, which is like kind of same as Star Wars, same as Lord of the Rings.
Spoilers, Bran becomes king, right?
Okay, you're right. Yeah.
So
But
Jon Snow doesn't become king. Jon
he's
Snow
even
ends
more
up right
pure
where
because
he
he's a
was.
little child. He's a child.
But
and-
he's not a child anymore. He's kind of
Oh,
like a
Grosso.
teenager who's also like psychic and like has like superpowers at this
he
point.
can control the dire wolf or whatever.
He can like teleport anywhere, like with his mind, basically.
Right. So he's got like
and-
ESP powers.
Yeah, the ruling class must unite to defeat the biggest external threat, climate change. Yeah, that's one thing you could take away from it. The
In
human spirit
2019, I
willingness
bet
to
people did take that from it.
Oh, I mean, I feel like the climate allegory was pretty heavy-handed, but like, the human spirit and
Winter
willingness
is
to
coming.
sacrifice for others. What is that like? What? I'm not clear how that is like the message. Like, at least I only know the ending like from the show, which I think is the only way to know the ending. So
It's the only ending that exists.
in the ending of the show, I guess Jon Snow is willing to sacrifice his love, Dany, who's also his aunt, so that like he can like he's willing to kill her so that she doesn't genocide the world, I guess.
Oh, where she kind of goes like tanky, right? With the dragon, right? And then
she goes,
they're supposed to be. I remember this
slaughters
scene.
like all the civilians in King's Landing.
Right. And then she's like, we're gonna marry each other and unite and rule the world. But then he sees that like she's gone too far, and he has to like murk her.
Yeah.
Assassinate her.
Exactly. And then he kills her, and then the dragon like is woke, and the dragon knows that like
she's bad.
It wasn't John's fault, and the dragon like does this thing where it like defiantly like burns the throne because it knows that it was really to blame was the throne, because the throne made them all fight, and then it flies away.
Thank you, dragon.
Even though Jon Snow just killed his mother, it realized the throne was really what killed his mother.
Wow, intellectual dragon. Yeah. Well, I actually
they are wise, right?
This is coming back to me now. I feel like people were comparing that scene to like Hillary in 2016, of like, because they always identified Khaleesi with like Hillary when the show was very popular.
She also like was like the savior of all the black slaves too, right? Like there was like
I think she did do something like that.
Yeah, there's that famous picture of like all the black people like lifting her up on their shoulders, and like
right.
I feel like that was a meme for a while.
But in a way, I feel like they kind of portray her as like, you know, kind of like she goes Patty Hearst. She goes third world Maoist and starts executing.
They do definitely portray her that way. That she
everyone
like goes native with like the. That's another thing, you know. Obviously, like I feel like the Dothraki are supposed to be Mongols, kind of, right? Or like kind
horse
of
riders.
Yeah. So now I'm thinking about how they sent all the Dothraki like in a cavalry charge like into all those zombies in the final season for no reason.
Just like sacrifice them all.
In contrast to any like concept of like how to fight a war. Like even I could tell you not to do that just from playing Civ. But but anyway,
so the good white like centrist liberal has to murder the tanky girl boss who's gone native. And the dragon forgives him, and then you know they're able to establish a gifted child on the throne.
Yes, King Bran, and but what? There was some other element to all this. Oh yeah, well I was gonna say that I would be interested to see like a show, you know, since like people don't read anymore. You know, obviously you could the critique you could make of what I'm saying is that like, well then just read a book or whatever, but people sometimes don't do that, and sometimes like people need to be encouraged to read books by like seeing TV shows and things like that. I'm sure that the Game of Thrones books became more popular as a result of the show, and obviously the show was hugely more popular than the book. So like I would be interested to see like a show about like the Mongol conquest of Baghdad or the Ilkhanate or like one of these like lesser known historical empires, because it is like actually what's interesting is like the tension, you know, because you do have like, it's not just a story of goodies and baddies, you know, you do have like extreme violence like in some cases, but you also have like, I mean, something that's like definitely like true and like widely recognized is that the Mongols like were like
as we learned years ago at the Genghis Khan Museum outside of Ulaanbaatar, Genghis Khan was a progressive.
In some ways,
like, they did describe him in that way.
Well, in some ways, like
wrongly.
It's like it's very interesting, and it's not like, you know, it's kind of the Mongols kind of like they almost got like sort of like a post-war like Ottoman Empire treatment in like historiography, where it's like, oh, they're just like burning and scorching and pillaging. I'm not saying that didn't happen, but like there are other aspects to it, you know, like they like it's not like so
it's
simple.
Not all that they were about
like,
by any means. Like they
it's always like, oh, you know, these barbarians came in and like everyone had to flee before their sword. It's like, well, now like historians do kind of feel that like all these sort of like, even though there was definitely a shift in like the Muslim world, for instance, like from Baghdad to Cairo, like, and that did come with like migration and stuff. It wasn't just that like everyone was like running away from the Mongols. Like in places like Iraq, like that movement was like much slower, and like, you know, people were to some extent like able to get on. Obviously, it varied like from place to place. There were definitely some of these atrocities people describe. Like, I think, I'm not diminishing them, but
if I recall correctly from what I read about the Mongols, is that like the whole thing of, you know, laying siege to a city and like killing everybody inside was sort of like a measure they would resort to if the leaders who they would come to were like obstinate and like, wouldn't surrender and make peace or whatever. Like there were a lot of places they sort of rolled through where they would sort of offer like, let us like nominally conquer you and then pay us a tax and like we'll just keep going. And like if you decide to like fight us, like we're gonna lay waste and make an example out of you, blah blah blah. And like I think that did happen in some cases, but in a lot of other places, like they kind of took control of these places and then built like sophisticated trade networks. I think they introduced like, I forget if it was like one of the first kind of fiat currencies or if it was a kind of standardized currency or something like that they introduced across these different regions and started connecting all of them together. Now of course it's like that, I'm not saying like, oh, that makes them like really good, but like they were about more than, and also making it sound like they're just slaughtering everybody kind of makes them sound like very anti-civilization, makes them sound like the White Walkers, like they just want to kill and burn everything. It makes them sound like ISIS. I mean, even ISIS like administered shit to some extent in their territories, but the Mongols were like a significant force, like they were governmental force. And I think they also were, they had a certain tolerance of like the pre-existing religious beliefs of they were like Tengryists or something, but they didn't try to impose their specific beliefs on
they also like
other
adopted,
populations.
Like there's
many of them
book,
converted eventually.
Islamization and native religion in the Golden Horde, which I think we need to talk about more at length one day. It's one of the best books I read in graduate school. It's huge. It's funny because it's an enormous book about like 2 pages of like text. It's like really interesting, but or like that's the sort of obvious. It's about more than that, but like it's like the axis of the book is like one sort of a story, and it's like a very short one, and then like the whole the book is huge, but it does like it's part of this more nuanced picture because like the obviously the institution of the Golden Horde itself like kind of started to break apart with Genghis Khan's death, but like his heirs like they had all sorts of different trajectories.
Right,
and,
right. They
like,
split off into these different khanates, even all the way to China and then practically to like, to Russia, like proto-Russia, Kiev Rus, you could say.
Yeah.
At that time. Yeah. And, and then down to Baghdad and like it really like, they controlled like a vast amount of territory, but then they were split up into like different, they were subdivided into different khanates, and then some of them ended up like converting to Islam. They all had kind of different fates. I remember I took a history of Central Asia class in college. It was very interesting. Like you don't hear about that like history very much. There be all kinds of cool shit you could do in different historical periods. It doesn't all have to be like sugary, fantasized, and kind of made child safe, which is what I feel like. For whatever, for all their compelling aspects.
Isn't child safe, I will say, yeah.
Right. And, and you are going to get, some good blood and guts and betrayal and all this other shit. It's, it actually makes me think of the earlier HBO show Rome, which was kind of an attempt to like thread the needle between a based on history to some extent, but like made up characters to sort of inhabit this world that like bumped up against real historical figures. And, it might come off as a little bit like 2000s dirtbaggy if I went back and watched it today.
I think
because it definitely loved the sex and violence.
Again, like I understand why they did it, but I just feel like I'm so sick of like the fall of the Roman Republic and Julius Caesar. Like I just think there's so many other interesting episodes in Roman history.
You're right. There are many Yeah, like the late Empire and even the sort of like the conversion to Christianity is so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's like the other side of the coin. It's like you either get like Ben-Hur type stories or Julius Caesar. And it's like, hey, what about... There was one good movie that was like, it was a little bit like, it wasn't perfect, but it was like kind of about like an early like Christian saint, kind of like in like a kind of later Roman Empire. I wish I remember what it was called. I think it might have been called Agora. A Spanish historical drama. So, she played Hypatia in 4th century Roman Egypt. Yeah. Rachel Weisz is Hypatia.
Wow.
Yeah. And mathematician and philosopher. Yeah, I think this is the one I'm thinking of.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Was
sad.
there?
It's easier than
it
ever
does
to
deal with
dig up.
Christianization. I think this is the movie
You
I'm
know,
thinking of. Yeah.
it's
yeah.
easier than ever to dig up like older histories of all kinds of things like across the world. You don't need to go dig through a
Yeah,
library
the
as much anymore.
Catilinarian conspiracy is interesting. Like, where's the movie about Cicero? Like,
Yeah, that's true.
he had a crazy life.
He had a crazy
he did
life.
kind of interact with that Caesar stuff.
Yeah,
so,
like you could even take a different angle of a contemporary of
Yeah.
Caesar that had a very interesting life in their own right, or
I'm surprised there hasn't been a movie that's like Brutus. Like
yeah,
that's
like did it like Wicked, but for
why
Brutus.
he did it. Yeah,
why he did it.
Yeah, kind of like Gore Vidal's Burr, but Brutus.
Especially in this era,
I guess
feel
the novel
like,
Julius Caesar's kind of. I guess Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar's kind of like that, but
I feel like in this 86-47 era, maybe the audiences are ready for a like Brutus did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Not saying you didn't, but yeah. No, there is a lot. As for him being a deadhead, I don't know. It explains like the kind of lib-brained like incoherence of like not having a point at the end of the day. Shit's just crazy, man. You just got to keep on trucking. It's kind of like that's the only way the Boomer story can kind of end is a return to like the good old days, and things just keep getting better. That's kind of the vibe.
Remember
I
at
guess.
the end, Arya sails off to go find America.
Like the Westeros's America.
She says,
like
it's very funny because she says, "What I want to find out what's west of Westeros," which is funny because like it implies that I guess they've been speaking English this whole time, and like they also have that. Like Westeros is called Westeros because it's west,
right?
And
well, you would have to assume that like this movie comes auto translated from whatever imaginary language they would have that isn't English.
The one thing I will say that like Tolkien is like better at, I mean,
was making his own language.
The languages are very, very interesting. The philological aspects of Tolkien are basically the only good parts, and like Yeah, like the Silmarillion is like so much more interesting than the Lord of the Rings, and I'll defend that position to I'll die on that hill. Well, I won't die, but I will stand on that hill. I'll back down like if pushed, I guess, 'cause I don't really care that much, but it definitely is better, and the language stuff, it's better. I like how the hobbits' names like in the book are technically like translated from like the actual language that they spoke, and like you can find like he actually came up with what their real names were, and they sound like Indian names. They sound like South Asian names, like Mary's name Meriadoc. His name is actually like Kalimak, and
Kaliak.
Kali for short.
Kaliak.
And like Frodo's name is like Mara, and I think Pippin's name is Reza Nur.
Isn't
that funny?
Interesting.
Yeah, but I guess like really
wow.
like the Westron or whatever language you're supposed to be speaking is actually like kind of based on like I don't know, like some like Finnish or something. I don't know. It's not based on. It's obviously not like based on Sanskrit or whatever, but
right.
Or,
he's kind of saying
Urdu
they're Hungarian
like that, but
a little way.
or Persian, but
yeah.
But
that's just
it's
whatever.
I mean, I'm kind of like I mean, I'm interested in fiction. I think fantasy is it's an interesting like genre in a way, because it's kind of like, I mean, it is an interesting history there. Like, at what point, and I don't really know the answer to this, at what point does fantasy like emerge from like the idea of like a romance? Like a romance in the sense of like like
the medieval romance of
like a made up
chivalric
story,
tale.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I mean, I would assume like the 19th century is when that type of specific genre first like emerged and then was sort of solidified as like having its own space in the market in the early 20th century.
In the 19th century, but like was it? I feel like it might actually have been even later that like because certainly I feel like even Tolkien himself would like probably just like refer to fairy stories, and the
Right.
fairy tale is
Fairy
definitely
tale.
something that well, I don't know if like truly like it might have like some like precedence in the 18th century, but definitely like the 9th century is like the heyday of the fairy story, and like Grimm's fairy tales and that stuff, and like all this kind of it kind of does tie into this sort of like rationalization of like folk belief and all of that stuff,
Right.
like puts
And
it into this
even
convenient
like
category.
Greco-Roman myths and things like that that often involve like characters that are kings and, interacting with gods and magic, and there's oracles. Like a lot of that Greek mythology is very influential in like European culture. You could see it as kind of like a modernization of that, like focusing on like monarchs and princesses and kings
I
and
mean,
princes.
yeah, well,
and-
really what I feel like the lineage is like Le Morte d'Arthur and like the sort of Arthuriana, like that's like where you
going
see,
on the
like,
quest of the Knights of the
Yeah.
Round Table, like Chaucer, like all that
Honestly,
kind of stuff.
David Gordon White talks a little bit about this in Daemons Are Forever, which we just discussed. Like
Mm.
he talks about how like those sort of fairy beliefs kind of made their way into like chivalric romance, and that's like really what it
I
is.
could see
Like
that.
you see like
Yeah.
the Green Knight and those figures. Like it's
Right.
not like and maybe there is actually like his argument I guess probably would be that like those things that were like gods were then like processed into like the Lady of the Lake and stuff like that, that kind of like Tir na Nog type of world or whatever you call it, like the fairy land of King Arthur and stuff. But I mean,
Yeah.
I do have like a soft spot for those. Like I do find that stuff kind of interesting. Like I really like when we were actually assigned to read La Morte d'Arthur in high school, and I really liked it. It's just because it's so weird in a way. Like and
I'm
those
sure.
the story is like so unusual. I just like when like and I will say like some things in Tolkien are like this, where like they kind of do keep that because he was like a philologist and everything, like they do
Yeah.
keep that like kind of weirdness that you feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
reading
there's-
actual like pre-modern or medieval literature,
It has a kind of
'cause that's, like,
druidic
what's
vibe
really-
in a lot of parts, like this
Yeah, or so it's just
misty,
like quite
druidic
like
thing.
like when he goes and sees Tom Bombadil and like it just like
Right,
what the
right.
hell's the point of this? Or when they go to
It's
the
so
like actually
weird.
the parts that were cut from the movie, this is probably a good point vis-a-vis like
Right.
the show and the book, like the Barrow Wights and all that stuff and like that like
Right.
stuff in Lord of the Rings. That's actually like kind of like and it doesn't really have much relevance to the larger story, like and certain like those parts are like kind of in a way like the more interesting parts because
Yeah.
like they don't like follow these like very like pat narrative structures that we're
Right.
like used to where everything
I
has
want
to
my
stay
Radagast
pat,
the Brown cameo. What the fuck?
Um,
Like why? Like I hate
well,
this.
he was in the
Radagast
Hobbit
Brown.
movies.
Oh, he was okay. They threw him
yeah.
in there, I guess. But I liked his little cameo in Lord of the Rings. He just kind of pops in, and it's like you never hear about him after that. And it's like, oh, it's one of those things that gives you a sense of a bigger like world. There's other wizards running around doing ops, not
Yes.
just Gandalf and yeah.
Yeah, it's true. The pulp fantasy takes a lot from Griffin's comment is correct. Shout out to Griffin 15 by the way,
Griffin
who's been a
15.
very consistent poster in the chat through like the last couple.
A lot of good,
so
good contributions.
Yeah, they're very good contributions.
Deserving
the,
that king icon, the crown.
Yeah, the top chat. Although
I don't know how you get it,
yeah,
but
yeah. Shout out to
deserving.
Matt Glyph Clan as top chat number 1 as well, I guess. But
Right.
but yeah, like it is true. Like there was this kind of like like this neo-romantic Victorian medieval pastiche that maybe the Lord of the Rings has some precedent in. Although I guess that's like really is very very influential. But yeah, I mean we definitely got to do Sus Tolkien at some point. But
we
yeah,
will.
Anyway,
We will.
so-
Yeah. Maybe we'll move to the next one. I'm just gonna run to the restroom for 1 second, and we can come back and maybe hit 1 or 2 more depending on time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Probably one.
Probably
based-
one,
Since we
yeah.
did those two took us an hour and a half.
Yeah,
which is
we'll
actually
see.
pretty good for us. I feel like.
it's pretty good.
Um,
Yeah. I don't know if you want to do Iron Mountain maybe next.
Yeah,
we could do
yeah. I think we can touch on that briefly. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, or corporate Memphis.
Yeah, we
Don't
can
wanna
maybe
spoil
briefly
the
talk
fun.
about corporate Memphis.
We could do that. It's kind of fun. All right,
yeah.
I'll be right back.
All right, seems like Dimitri is back.
All right, I'm back. So do you want to read the number 3
Yes,
one
I will.
here?
I will read this.
I don't think we.
Let's do this because it's shorter.
Yeah.
What, in your view, is the deal? Well, I mean, this maybe go on forever in terms of talking about the deal is, but what, in your view, is the deal with a design style known as corporate Memphis?
Good question. Yeah. Let's let me see if I can find some examples here, some visual examples for people as to what corporate. It's the kind of thing where I feel like a lot of you, dear listeners, if you're online enough, you'll immediately recognize this style of this figural.
I didn't know the term, but I definitely know the art style.
Right. I started
It's
noticing
like
the style.
like mandatory
HR
HR
approved.
video or interactive game style. Like, yeah, if you had to take like an HR onboarding, like do an HR onboarding interactive like game or something, this will be like it'll be in this art style. Like people with like blue heads and like really long limbs.
It's flat. They have let's see here. Let me see if I can bring this up for everybody. Let's see. Let's go to Safari. Why does everyone hate Algeria corporate Memphis? I thought it was pretty fun and unique. There we go. All right. Let's yeah, so this you could see here. This is corporate Memphis, like kind of personified. And yeah, I'd say HR is a good thing to like associate it with in general. You know, I think it often gets associated with sort of like, I guess in the early 2020s, I feel like it sort of represented like Biden era, like woke institutional, like art style, like, you know, like an institution that was trying to signal that it was like woke would be using this style in a way. And it kind of just, I don't know, it just started popping up. And I wondered, like, what's like the thinking behind this? Like, it's if a memo went out.
I guess it's woke insofar as like they have like, you know, they don't have a identifiable race. Although I feel like
so a lot of them do like specify, like, I mean, they'll have, you know, tones that correspond to maybe, you know, different ethnicities.
Yeah, I definitely see some corporate Memphis style like drawings where like you can tell what race people are supposed to be. So I don't know. I mean. Yeah,
but it definitely
guess,
was. It's like uncontrovertible.
I
mean, it was associated with that.
Well, certainly it's not associated with like the right wing. No. Like it's definitely not like you're seeing like Nazi propaganda in this style. I mean,
but also maybe the tech culture more broadly it's associated with.
Yeah,
like,
it's ultimately just like, to me, I like associate it with like HR, which of course is not like, you know, trying to have like a Title IX issue. I don't know. Yeah, like I feel like. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time when people are complaining about wokeness, what they are complaining about is like HR at their email jobs. But I don't know. I'm just like, I'm just trying to like say like, you know, let's yeah, like I guess I'm just trying to not be too like throwing around the word like woke for everything bad, you know. Like
I mean, that's not like why
yeah.
I personally don't love this style is because it's like quote unquote woke, but I'm talking about a particular heavy air quotes woke in a corporate context, which is like probably the most cynical context in which it could probably be deployed. You know what I mean? But it has a kind of like positive feeling, you know, to it that that like HR companies would obviously go for to cause like the least amount of I feel like a lot of NGOs used it as well, kind of in the early 2020s. It just kind of became.
I'm trying to think of like one example of this. You know, like I just like think of like it must be like an HR video, but like when I search corporate Memphis, I just see like a bunch of like articles about it. I want to like, you know, yeah, like now that I know of it, obviously I recognize it, I've seen it a million times, but I want to see like an example of it. Like now,
well, it's mostly
you know?
not video. It's mostly like photos of, like, if you look at Google Images or something. So you know, the like the basic ingredients of this are flat 2D vectorized illustrations, exaggerated proportions, long legs, big hands, tiny heads, basic geometric style with no shading or textures, and stylized iconic backgrounds. The characters are almost always active and joyful. They run, jump, and smile as they collaborate on their computers and smartphones. That's the other thing, is they're always so like joyous. Like every corporate Memphis like cartoon character is like living their best life, and like they're so just loving it and stuff. I don't know. Maybe there's ones that deal with like depression.
What I'm wondering is
sad
like
characters, but
was there like what like preceded corporate Memphis? You know what it kind of reminds me of, like that art style. It's like a famous artist, and like I feel like I really should know his name, but it's like the people who are kind of like like they're kind of like stick figures, like they're like yellow or orange, and there's like also dogs, like barking dogs, like. It's kind of like a doctor's office, like artist, like where they have this picture, like pictures of the. I know you know what I'm talking about, but I just can't like articulate it well enough. Like it would be like kind of like I'm gonna find it, like dancing, stick figures, artist, dogs. Was it Keith Haring?
Oh yeah, Keith. I was just thinking, like, are you talking about the Keith Haring little the dancing like figures?
I think so. Yes, I am. Yes. Yeah, kind of reminds me of that a little bit.
Yeah, it does. And I've always felt like a little bit like the Keith Haring. Like he's an important artist of his era. He died of AIDS tragically, etc. I think a lot of his designs are. Like he's got some paintings that I think are like cool and interesting, but like the dancing like kumbaya people that were always on like the cover.
Honestly, like I think I've blown this open because I think this must be the direct inspiration for corporate Memphis.
It probably is. It's
like a slightly less stylized and like less interesting version of like a Keith Haring dancing.
Yeah,
picture. Like I'm looking at it right now.
The stick figures with no facial expression.
Yeah,
dancing. And yeah, I always thought it was a little bit like cool. Like, I don't know. It's just kind of like, okay. It felt very like lib to me, even though maybe that's not like where he was coming from. Like it has like Live Aid vibes because I think they used it for some of those like weird Bob Geldof charity concerts. Maybe like they used the Keith Haring like holding hands figurine kind of, or the little dancing people, kind of doing their thing. And I don't know, everybody loved it. Everybody fucking loved it in like the late 80s and 90s. And maybe because I was like too young to like really be aware of the context, I just would see it everywhere. And it's kind of like, it seemed kind of lame to me. I don't know. Yeah, but I think you can see a thing, you could see like a parallel. The other thing I just noticed like a minute ago looking at it, which is like probably totally coincidental, but given the time that corporate Memphis reached saturation, there's also like a weird kind of similarity to the NPC meme from 4chan in the way that the eyes and the nose are drawn. But it's of course like beyond that, it's much more colorful and like impressionistic in its like shapes, but like the face is still the face of like the gray NPC meme, like very, very similar. Like you'd see it in some more than others.
It's funny because like I guess I just was not using Facebook like enough, but according to this article, which is actually pro corporate Memphis, it's called "Facebook made a certain type of illustration ubiquitous, but it's time to stop knocking it." I mean, according to them, like Facebook basically it's like their in-house art style that was known as Allegria.
Okay.
And so like they like proliferated it, and then it was
Everyone
adopted.
copied it.
Like Slack and Google copied it, and then banking apps, everything.
Okay, so actually, it goes back further though, because it was based on the designs of the 1980s Italian Memphis group, that's where it gets its name from, like corporate Memphis. So this was like an architecture and design group that was around in the 80s and used a lot of these kind of like simplistic, like almost candy colored, like, candy colors and like simplistic sort of designs. I'm trying to see like, I'm looking at some kind of like furniture they've made, and I want to see like figural representations. I don't know if they did that, but yeah, you can see a kind of like a fun, almost like childlike innocent. I'm trying to see what kind of ideas they sort of, or like why they were so important, like why they were very influential. Are actually interesting. Some people have said their colorful furniture has been described as bizarre, misunderstood, loathed, and a shotgun wedding between Bauhaus and Fisher Price. So yeah, it does have this kind of like childlike, goofy like look to it that maybe a lot of people kind of thought this is like kind of ridiculous. This isn't good. You know what it kind of has? If you look at it, let me see if I can bring this up here. It has like the Dire Straits, like Money for Nothing MTV music video kind of vibe to it, I would say. Let's see. Yeah, I can bring this up here. If you look at on the YouTube and like it looks almost like animated by an early 3D computer with how fucking 80s it is. Like it's like a parody of like 80s like crazy colors and blah blah blah. And I guess a lot of people like looked down on it at the time. But then it had its revenge when Facebook sort of I guess adopted it as its
Yeah, I mean, I guess like it is something that's easy to make like digitally because it's so like it's pretty simple.
Yeah, and like the not having to deal with shading like definitely simplifies things, and oftentimes it does use like kind of Simpsons-esque like colors, which is especially in like the late 2010s is like a very easy HR friendly way to just like not give any room to like offending anybody or anything. Like it just it has a universalist element that everyone's just like a cartoon, and yeah. Wow.
And these people are comparing it to Andre Matisse's La Danse, the second version of these orange people kind of dancing around. I do kind of see the resemblance, to be honest.
La Danse.
But,
let me check it out. From 1910. Wow. Oh, okay. Yeah, and I mean I can kind of see it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like quite exactly the same, but
it's got a little more.
They are
pizzazz
orange.
on it, I would
they're
say.
kind of dancing. Yeah.
But there's kind of very like
a bit
smooth.
less flat.
Everything's very smooth and flat, and it does like there's like a corporate menace behind it whenever I like see it. That because it's so cutesy and like childlike, but it's like aimed at adults, like this type of stuff. Whether it's like it's some kind of activist pamphlet or like it's some corporate thing, like I don't know, like especially when it's a big tech corporation using it, it's like what's hiding behind this like happy little mask, of like everything's so great, everything's awesome, it's like got that like forced positivity vibe that definitely kind of crested in the 2010s. It still has a lot of like haters, but it somehow took
I feel like
over
it's
everything.
probably dead now because like all it's just like but
there was a lot of writing about
what is
it
the
in
Facebook in-house style now.
What is I'm just gonna ask that to Google. In-house style now. Yeah, did they kind of like when Zuckerberg kind of Gen Z'd out and to think they went through a kind of makeover? Yeah. It doesn't. Well, yeah, it doesn't say what their in-house style is now, or I can't find it at the very least.
Yeah, I'm looking like Facebook aesthetic identity 2025.
They did bring minimalismo to the internet. That was kind of their big thing, right? Remember, like compared to messy MySpace and the early internet, Facebook was so clean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why
True.
I'm glad the corporate Memphis art style is dead. That was from 2023. But I think we started to see more of like a clapback against it, and even more like I started seeing a lot of parodies of corporate Memphis.
Yeah,
maybe around
like
2022.
Children, blue woman. Yeah, like it's like a blue.
Oh yeah,
woman.
the Saturn eating the Cronus eating their children.
Yeah,
corporate Memphis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like Brad Trammell started sharing a lot of like satirical corporate Memphis around like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I started to realize like how ubiquitous it was. That's pretty funny. Yeah, let's see. Can we get Kronos? Kronos devouring her children, corporate Memphis style. There we go. I don't know. There's just something so weird, and so
I
much is
found this good
encapsulated
article,
about.
The Arts at Facebook and Aesthetic Infrastructure for Surveillance Capitalism by Fred
Ooh.
Turner.
Oh,
It's
okay.
pretty good. It talks about how like Facebook basically like has like all these like internal arts organizations. Um,
Interesting.
Zuckerberg hired muralists to decorate its walls. The company supports two intertwined arts organizations: the Analog Research Laboratory, growing out of the company's internal community of designers, producing the posters seen in Building 10. The other, the Artists in Residence program, invites painters, sculptors, graffiti artists, and others to make site-specific pieces in Facebook's workspaces.
Right. They had
Both
graffiti
programs
on the walls.
began in
Yeah.
Menlo Park and have since spread to Facebook's offices around the world. Um, this essay argues that posters and murals do much more than simply brighten the walls. They transform political and aesthetic movements into management tools.
Oh
The
my
arts
God.
at Facebook blur the line between the public social sphere and private corporate space, and they encourage workers to imagine the company as a community centered on the celebration of individual creativity. Definitely kind of like what you get in some of these pieces of corporate
Yeah.
Memphis art. Such
Okay.
practices have deep roots in 20th century corporate America, and especially in the internet-related industries that sprang up across America in the early 1990s.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah. I found it was actually the Buck agency that designed this for Facebook in, I believe, 2017 on their website. They described it actually has like a birth and death date. Facebook Allegria 2017 2020. A new style guide, illustration, and animation system for the entire Facebook ecosystem. There's many imitators, but there's only one, Allegria. And oh my God, it's a
Yeah.
bunch of Allegria figures holding up a gigantic Facebook like thumb, like
wow.
with like weird
Yeah.
elongated limbs and shit. They said Facebook approached us in 2017 to do a complete redesign of their entire illustration and animation ecosystem. We assembled a team of illustrators, and a year later, Allegria was born. Allegria is Spanish for joy, which is apropos. That's how we felt creating this fun, playful world. Core principles. We designed and built a scalable system rooted in flat, minimal geometric shapes. The figures are abstracted. Oversized limbs and non-representational skin colors help them instantly achieve a universal feel. So it is, that was very conscious of them to go for this like hard universality. They have a whole style guide here of how you too can do Allegria or corporate Memphis. And I guess that's what people did because everyone started copying this in like the late 2010s. I guess it would have come out in like 2018 because it took them a year to describe it or to put it together. And I guess this is like the aesthetic across all of Facebook. Have you worked there in these years?
I guess so.
It says surfaces. Our illustrations permeate their entire interface across mobile, desktop, and print. Great. Yeah, you just can't escape it. It's like
I mean, like the way they put it, like creating a world, like does make sense because like it is kind of like it is like sort of these like images from like this very harmonious like world where like you said, like everyone's just like having a great time, like everyone gets along,
right,
and like there's these,
wonderful.
Like, blue people and orange people,
right,
and like no one like hates each other, and like everyone's having a good time whether they're like hanging out like on the street. It's kind of like, it also sort of reminds me of like it's kind of like Sesame Street or something, it's kind of like it has like that sort of like, it's like a New York vibe, like like a harmonious neighborhood,
yeah, it's like the perfect neoliberal metropolis like lifestyle kind of thing. They're carrying a little matcha
where it's like, hey buddy, like how you doing, like here's some like where you going? Oh, to my job at Facebook, like have fun, like
well, I wonder
like,
why it seeped into the sort of activist space to the extent that it did to some, like you would see it in like a particular currents of maybe more like rad lib kind of activist like NGO things and like maybe from like 2019 to like 2022, and it feels like the least radical style like possible. But I wonder like how many people working for these types of groups are like, I remember DSA Election Guide 2022 in Los Angeles, corporate Memphis out as fuck. Like it was like literally a bunch of little corporate Memphis people like working on a campaign together. And it's like, how many people in these orgs are like tech people that have been like incepted with the corporate Memphis thing? And it's like the only aesthetic that they're like comfortable with. It's that their natural aesthetic that they like think is appealing. Because I feel like if you don't work in a tech company and you're not exposed to this, you like look at the specific art and you're kind of like, what is this? You know, like it's a little bit, or, you know, comes off like too HR, too
I do
kind
see
of
like
whatever.
a lot of like how to vote like graphics that like are basically in this.
Yeah, like a lot of like,
yeah.
we're heckin' democracy activists. Like that kind of shit would use corporate Memphis nonstop for like a number of years.
Yeah,
maybe
DSA
it's fallen
basically did like adopt it. It's true.
Yeah, like why
you know,
did I want the
even at, like,
answers. Why did DSA adopt corporate Memphis? Like that's the we see y'all out here. Like what? This deserves an explanation. You know, like what does it say about the class character of like, you know, like DemSoc groups in big cities, or, you know, maybe like mutual aid kind of things, maybe a little less so. But like there's a very PMC kind of vibe to some groups that, and I think then they adopt corporate Memphis,
I feel like,
which
yeah,
might
I'm
be a
trying to
reflection
find
of
like
that.
the voter guide. I do remember like that there was like that DSA like. I feel like it was really on that like that DSA like singles event that was like controversial. It was like, fine, you're like socialist,
like hoes and
mate.
trots, like, or what was it? Something
Oh
like
my
that.
god,
like,
was that what it was?
something like that, like tricks and trots or something like that.
Tricks and trots.
Yeah, yeah. Tanky's not allowed naturally, but trots allowed. Yeah, classic. Yeah, they held it like the Zionist nightclub, the Israel themed nightclub, I should say. But yeah, it's like a lot of. I mean, I guess maybe people that are doing work like are there in say like New York City or San Francisco. They have a tech job, but they're idealistic, and then they use the only visual language they know when it's time to make like a DSA pamphlet, and it's just fucking hardcore corporate Memphis out to the max.
See like some other art styles that they're using as well. I mean,
yeah, there's a diversity.
Yeah.
I don't want to say all the art
but
ever. It's just I've seen
I
some
feel like
examples.
I've definitely seen them dabble in it. Yeah,
Like to a degree that like how many of you work for Google kind of vibe, you know, like. Because I don't know, like sometimes I feel it is a world unto itself. Like I've never worked for a tech company beyond the retail store level, so I've never been inundated into like the sort of business cult of Stacks and like all these other weird little apps everyone has to communicate on, and like the culture, you know.
I almost feel like the companies. DSA like vision is like basically the same like vision that like you get from like the Allegria like style guide. You know, it's basically like, you know, that ideal like metropolis of like gay luxury space communism is basically like that.
Yes.
You know, like it's like everyone like it's like. Hey, like, do you need some glasses? Like, I enjoy glasses and making them. Like, here you go. Like, it's kind of like that. Like,
hey,
you know,
do you need insulin? I have a bathtub.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I get you some of that mutual aid insulin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know.
I mean, I will hand it though to because they're one campaign right now that could be absolute patient zero for corporate Memphis could be the Zoran campaign, but he clearly has some savvy designers working for him because he's moved on to the gold font era that now even Cuomo is copying, and like the sort of like chuggy gold font is the new vibe. I think it's taken over from corporate Memphis, and I don't know where that came from. I don't know if, you know, Zoran's team invented it, but like if you type in like you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I like the Zoran font.
Yeah, the Zoran font. Yeah. Like that.
Yeah,
that's a new arrival.
Seen, like, any art from Zoran.
I mean, the video has a specific style. He does a lot of like kind of pan in, like fast cuts with like
now.
Zooming in, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah. What is this font? Like, what is this influenced by? I don't know. Like, I feel like it does remind me of something. It's kind of like, it does kind of have like this sort of like New Deal-y kind of like, you know, mid-century sort of like style, you know? It kind of looks like, you know, the font on like some comic book that like Alan Moore would have read or something, you know, like.
Interesting. It kind of uses the golden blue of the at least what was the New York license plate for like when I lived there, the sort of Empire State, you know, that golden blue kind of pattern.
The font though, I mean,
the font's different, but the colors are kind of evoke that New York kind of vibe. It's kind of got a Zabar's like, you know, kind of style to it a little bit. And it's kind of become very quickly on TikTok. Like the gold font is now kind of the new luxury, living in a metropolis, getting your matcha on the way to blah blah blah, you know, like this is a day in the life of a 30-year-old programmer in New York City, like those kind of commercials. Like it's become a new almost like status symbol to pop that retro gold font. It's also kind of like Wes Anderson-y a little bit, I would say. Like it's got a little twee kind of energy to it, but it's a little bit like classy. It's not as clean and, you know, sans serif as a lot of the textiles were maybe in the past decade. Things are getting a little more ornamental. Yeah,
it definitely has those little. I see those little tags on the letters. I think on the H I see some serifs. I think on the N.
Yeah, actually, Memphis Milano is actually much more like loud and kind of like super 80s maxed and like crazy than corporate Memphis is. Corporate Memphis is kind of like muted, you know, in this.
Yeah, I guess that's the only thing. The only branding that he really has is like he doesn't have like a whole. Yeah, I mean, I guess like political campaigns usually don't roll out like a bunch of like people dancing around like doing activity images. Yeah, but I mean, I feel like it is like. It is interesting how it does like it's something about the corporate Memphis out. Yeah, like they do seem to like they live in New York. It's always summer. You know, maybe they live in LA because it's always summer, but it's also like a walkable city. You know, it's not like the corporate city. Memphis city is not.
They have free buses. Free buses, free internet everywhere, bike lanes. Important.
I think we may have frozen on stream.
Oh, let me see. Let me restart capture. All right. How about? Let me see. How about that? Oh, okay, here we go. Yeah, we're back.
All right, we're good.
We're back. Wow, that hasn't happened in a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess, you know, maybe.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely a walkable city they live in.
Yeah, with bike lanes, free buses, and kind of this like Western European, like Scandinavian like dream about like a chill.
I feel like it's literally
democratic.
Sesame Street, but it's like never cold out. Like they're never wearing like winter coats unless like maybe there's some kind of winter related brand like you know advertisement that like it has to be winter, but usually it's not. And they're usually like, you know, they're usually engaged in mutual aid in some way where like they're exchanging goods, but like not, you know, for money necessarily, or they're like working on their computers, like making the world a better place.
Yeah.
Or,
yeah.
you know,
It's a frictionless world with like no unsettling aspects or sharp edges or like confrontational like things that can't be like negotiated with like a kindly chat about, I don't know, like with like an HR guide on like how to behave in certain situations or something like that. Space filler, blah blah blah. I found some other this is funny that this article from 2024 claims that corporate Memphis wasn't just about being easy on the eyes. It was a rebellion against the monotony of traditional corporate design. Gone were the days of dull gray suits and lifeless pie charts. Instead, bold colors like electric blues, fiery reds, and sunshine yellows took center stage. These hues weren't just for show. They were an essential part of the storytelling experience. I mean, that's already a little bit. I'm not buying that in like 2017. That like the world was so
color
gray.
Palette thing, like it's there kind of was like a thing where like after a while, like infographics like did kind of like change the way they looked, where like they were kind of in that style, like in that color palette.
They became cuter, and
but I am
poppin'.
curious. Yeah, it's true. Like, was there any style where like before that was like what was the sort of like corporate style like that was prevalent like prior to that? You know, I feel like there wasn't like a different way of drawing cartoon people and depicting them in situations that like predated that. It was like something that's like we need to. I guess it makes sense that it like originated like for a social media app, you know,
right?
Which is funny because like it's all about people interacting on the street, but like the app itself is like, you know, totally like mediatizing that and abstracting it from reality. But
it's funny, you can kind of almost look at it as like almost like prefiguring the push for the metaverse that would happen in like 2021, where it shifted from, not that these ads were using like a lot of like live actor like photos before, but making a push towards like figural representation, but in like this flattened avatar, like 2D kind of thing. It's almost like a depiction of what we all are on the social network. We're these 2D like cartoons that are like walking around that can live in like a utopia, a magical utopia, and where like nothing is ever really wrong, and we all kind of have like cute little, like fun little quirky, cute lives. And but I mean, maybe before that, there was a kind of push with when Apple was really dominant from like the late 2000s to like the early 2010s. The kind of like sleek, like monochrome Apple minimalism was like kind of influential, I think.
Definitely.
A lot of silver, a lot of like just like clean, like
Helvetica, the font Helvetica.
Helvetica was huge, American Apparel and everything. Though actually American Apparel, I think, was one of the first people to bring back the Memphis style in like the early 2010s. Though that might have like brought it back into consciousness a little bit, and then led actually LA-based design firm Buck to, you know, really go for it and make like a whole art style based on it.
Before that, like, it's kind of weird to think back, like, before that, like, I feel like, yeah, like, before that, you kind of had, like, the 90s, where everything was, like, it was kind of like that, but, like, the 90s
out.
Was, like, Keith Haring itself, you
Right,
know?
was,
like
everything was, like graffiti, like, pop
graffiti,
of color,
like,
intensity.
Pizza, like, like, pizza, like, pepperoni,
like doing a kickflip over a gigantic slice of pizza while, like, chugging, like, Gushers or something. I don't know.
Tech, it's very interesting, like, the tech vocabulary was, like, totally different. Like, if you think of, like Microsoft Xbox, like they still kind of have that a little bit, where it's like green and black is like
there's
tech,
a style,
you know,
I forget the name.
Like,
I was
like
just
Alienware, you know,
yeah, like the
cool,
PlayStation
you know?
late 90s. That has another, I forget what it's called, like Millennium Cool or something like that. That was like the green and black, like the Matrix was like that type of like color design. Everything very like sleek and cyber.
Or like the Capri Sun commercials where like everything was like liquid metal, like the Terminator. Yeah.
Everything's like shiny, like you could see it in it's kind of like rave culture inspired, but like the crazy 90s, like balloon pants and like wearing like goggles on your forehead for no reason and having like spiky like dyed hair, and you know, just everything's crazy.
That's like cyber goth, like
cyber goth kind of thing. Like it was just more. It was kind of like maximal, like more of everything. Kind of accelerationist. I guess actually Apple stores did start employing their own version of corporate Memphis. I guess they did this after it got popular. So in some of the stores now, they're like great, like Diego Rivera corporate Memphis, like murals on the wall, basically. That's crazy. Because it says
used my banana yellow iPhone on screen. That was the only kind they had when I finally upgraded.
Oh, you got your yellow iPhone. Yeah. Wow. And yet
it's literally the only
Apple.
color they had. I finally upgraded, like, after, you know, many, many years. It's an iPhone 14 that I have. And, you know, I mean, I'm not going to defend it, but...
this is also interesting. The influence of Mary Blair's Disney concept art and Charlie Harper's minimalist realism can be traced in its vibrant, whimsical characters. So there's a line of kind of Disney... influence in corporate Memphis, which does not surprise me. So I guess Mary Blair was an artist who drew like concept art for a lot of the classic films like Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, and Cinderella. So her, you know, preliminary, actually, I'm kind of looking at it like it is kind of corporate Memphis, actually. Like, holy shit. Like it's very flat.
Alice Blair? Is that
Mary Blair?
Oh, Mary Blair.
If you look up like Mary Blair Disney, you'll see these must be from like the 40s that are very like. There's one of the ballroom dancing scene in Cinderella. Let me see if I can pull it up here on the screen.
Yeah, I kind of see it. Yeah.
Yeah, Mary Blair Cinderella concept art.
Interesting.
Let me see.
Right.
You can kind of see that there.
It's kind of corporate Memphis. Yeah.
Right. It's got that flat, like very little expression on the face kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of like very like abstract looking people. You know, their heads are big instead of small. That's like the one thing. But I guess maybe a lot of them are children.
Right.
Yeah,
but it does.
Cinderella, it looks a lot very corporate Memphis.
It gets to another thing that bothers me about like what corporate Memphis evokes, and that is a kind of like Disney adult vibe.
Well, yeah, like I said, it does kind of remind me of Sesame Street. Like the world they live in seems like Sesame Street, where like Elmo could walk by like any second, you know, like, um,
Right.
yeah, and be like, or yeah,
Yeah, there is. Yeah, it's like I don't know. I don't know. It. I guess it's falling. Let me see. There was an article. Okay, like let's see. Yeah, corporate Memphis fits snugly into the
Big
millennial
Bird could show
aesthetic,
up.
uh, characterized by curved lines. So Donna Haraway approved. Curved lines,
Oh,
clean
good.
backgrounds,
Curved lines.
and a
Yeah.
dreamy color palette. Its dominance began with big tech companies like Facebook. It found a breeding ground in the fintech and property sectors, where small companies seeking distinction turned to its quirky, digital-first style as an easier solution than traditional stock imagery. It's true, like stock imagery became like a meme, like by the like early 2010s. Like you
Yeah.
could kind of tell when people were using stock imagery, and it was like with like the watermark still on it. There's a lot of jokes about like that, it being kind of like cringe because stock imagery has its own like deracinated look to it because it's so generic. Like by design, it's generic.
Yeah. I guess it kind of is like clip art, basically, like sort of, like I could see like, yeah, I don't know if Microsoft Word even has clip art anymore. Actually, I have like, Microsoft Word, so let me see if they still have clip art and like what it looks like.
What, Clippy? You mean? Oh no, clip
no,
art.
not Clippy, clip art.
Okay.
Like I don't have it on this computer. Yeah. I have it on my other computer that I use to write. Even though I don't write in Microsoft Word, but I just used it to sign my name using the draw feature. But I have it for free because it's like inheritance from grad school.
Conflicting
Yeah.
perspectives on corporate Memphis between corporate owners and designers. This is from Art4D from this year. I want to see if there's been any updates about the debate. Is it corporate Memphis? Is it done, or is it hanging on? Yeah, it says the real question is, why did big tech embrace this style so wholeheartedly while many designers and illustrators found it so uninspiring? The answer lies in its inherent friendliness. It may sound counterintuitive, but here's the key. Despite its bright, eye-catching colors, corporate Memphis is, in essence, devoid of identity. The figures it depicts lack defining characteristics. There's no distinction between height, weight, or even race. No one is particularly tall, short, fat, or thin. Their bodies are thick, blocky shapes with unnatural skin tones, making it virtually impossible for anyone to accuse a company of bias or exclusion. As one Reddit comment put it, let's make all the people bland, happy colors and shapes that just resemble humans. Can't imagine anyone being offended by that. For corporations, corporate Memphis is an excellent tool for cultivating a friendly and approachable brand image. By communicating through these graphics, companies can make users feel more at ease with their platforms. However, this is precisely where frustration has begun to brew among many creators who are repeatedly commissioned to reproduce these visuals. The charm of its friendliness stems from an endless loop of playing it safe, which, over time, has led to a growing sense of creative fatigue and even outright disdain. Corporate Memphis feels like design without a real brief, something endlessly replicable, built from basic shapes and easily mass-produced without requiring actual drawing. This has resulted in an overwhelming flood of bland, identityless illustrations that have become visually exhausting. Ultimately, while one can sympathize with designers rolling their eyes at this trend, it's also worth considering. Hasn't graphic simplicity always been around? Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it do be like that they're just bland, quasi-human figurines that live in a magical, colorful world where like nobody can get offended or mad about anything, and that's the coercive like thing lurking in it that makes me kind of like instinctively hate it. Is that
I guess I can imagine like a corporate Memphis drawing of like someone being mad, like. It would be like an HR, like, instructional video of like someone like, yelling at like the other, like maybe like some speech lines would be coming out of its mouth.
You know what? I'm going to test this theory by typing in corporate Memphis no kings protests. Because if somebody made an image of like, we need to get out there for the no kings protest, like the odds that they would use corporate Memphis to show like a little like angry protester with a little speech bubble or something. But I'm not getting any hits, honestly. It might have fallen off. Corporate Memphis protest flyer.
Here's
Okay, I found. Now I'm hitting paid. I'm hitting paid. Kids, not corporations. Here's an example of it. They do have fists raised in the air, but they still look pretty happy, I will say. Stronger together. Teamwork turns dreams into reality. Not sure if this is together. Oh, these are kind of like motivational posters. Together we thrive. Very happy.
Do I have share screen permission? Let me try to share this.
Let me see what happened here.
There you go.
Okay. There we go.
Memphis angry. Is it working?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it is working.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh no, he's angry. He has no. He has no eyes.
Yeah, and I like how the person is like nonplussed too.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Like, what?
With
like,
no feet, and she doesn't even have a mouth.
Exactly. It's the first man in corporate Memphis world to ever become angry, I guess.
He has only a mouth, and he must scream.
Yeah.
Yeah. He has no eyes, no nose, just a mouth screaming.
Yeah.
It's honestly
exactly.
terrifying.
And he's saying like scribble
gibberish. Like, was this made by AI?
Yeah.
I bet AI is good at doing corporate Memphis.
I'm sure it's amazing at
except
it.
for the fingers, but
I mean that's basically the whole point, is that like you can make it very easily like digitally. Yeah.
Right. They not very there's only one example I can find of an actual like protest with corporate Memphis. Sad to say. Wow. Yeah, now a people parade images. Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, you can. There's so many.
I found that image by searching how to deal with angry coworker, because like a bunch of what comes up is just like corporate Memphis like pictures. Yeah.
Corporate Memphis Democratic Socialists. Let me just see real quick.
Well, the only people who call it that are like critics.
Are detractors.
So you have to just like search for like
It's like Methodism.
Yeah, exactly. You have to search for like, what's like a DSA term, like, Democratic Socialists of America. I'm just gonna search that and see how many corporate Memphis things I get. And it's mostly just like the tag that I see here.
The 2024 primary election voter guide is the one that's corporate Memphis out to the max that I'm seeing right now. I think I used it as the cover art for one of our previous Q&A episodes.
Funny.
That actually might be the only example that I can find of such people using.
I'm seeing a Coffee with Comrades poster for DSA New Orleans, where the comrades, it's not corporate Memphis really. The comrades are coffee cups, but it almost looks kind of AI it's not AI generated necessarily, because I thought that they had extra arms, but I realized that they just have handles because they are cups.
Okay. I am seeing 2024 election California voter guide, but I think this is from maybe the San Francisco Chronicle itself. Uses corporate Memphis of 4 different people with VOTE spelled on their backs.
That's cool.
Yeah, they actually have a whole guide. The whole voter guide is corporate Memphis. Like, there's multiple slides of like a step-by-step process in corporate Memphis of how you can vote and what to vote on, etc. I think, like the yellow TikTok font is working for people right now. I would probably recommend to not.
There's also there's like another style that's also DSA, which I would describe as like possibly even more DSA, that I would describe as like corporate Memphis like meets like retro. It's like a slightly more like detailed form of corporate Memphis that has like a somewhat similar color palette, but maybe a bit more muted. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I don't. I will say there is an aesthetic variation across chapters. I'm just looking right now. Some people are almost going for like the sort of constructivist, like man-machine craftwork kind of vibe. Like 1920s Soviet, and then other chapters are. Let me see.
okay, I found like a great example of what I'm talking about. In fact, it's a graphic history of the DSA, and it's in the sort of like it's not like really corporate member per se, but it's like definitely a discernible style. And I'm gonna send it to you in the chat.
Is this the one where somebody's holding the future is mutual aid sign?
No, they're holding. Oh yes,
Together
yes,
we lift the sky.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yes,
this is kind of like comic book. Yeah, it's like indie comic book kind of.
Yeah,
vibes.
exactly. Yeah, it's like Ghost World sort of. Well, I guess not. I don't know. I don't remember what Ghost World looked like.
This could be a Fantagraphics release or something. Yeah, no, a lot of comic book writers. Yeah, you know. They're putting their skills to work. The hand, is very specific. The two hands shaking with the rose.
Yeah.
It's a bold image. I'll give them credit for that. At the very least. But it was probably, I don't know when it was adopted, maybe by the sus people in the 70s that were like pro-Vietnam War. But, other than that, yeah, not to pick on the DSA, solely, but it's just one example. You see how deep does this tradition,
go.
You
almost can't like fault them in a way either because like obviously like it works. Like there's a reason why like everyone adopted this to like show their product. Like it's like you can't like just blame them. Like it worked on people.
Right? Advertising is about
did, like
pulling
sort of
people
like
in.
have an aura that people like instinctively like trusted and like responded to,
right, which yeah, to the extent that focusing on like looking kind of soft and approachable is like
honestly,
and kind of
like I
as
almost feel like there is like because if I'm thinking about like an HR video like or an HR like interactive thing, it's either gonna have like corporate Memphis or it's just gonna have like almost nothing. In a way, so I almost do have like this slight positive kind of like association with corporate Memphis, like on some visceral level because like it's like they put like a little bit of effort into this or like this it's not like just like and maybe it's just like colorful.
I'd give it higher marks than AI generated stuff, which people are
it's probably
kind
the same
of
at this
resorting
point,
to.
but
yeah, or you're right, to kind of like such a minimalism that like there's kind of nothing even there. There's no representation really of anything. There's just like font, or something like that on black, and that's depressing in its own way. So, I understand the desire to be...
Although I guess, like, there's really no reason why it should be more tedious to watch. Like, am I really, like, on the level of, like, a baby that is, like, amused by colors and would rather watch, like, a colorful HR video than one that's just, like, don't do this, don't do that, Or, like, a test where I'm, like, I have to read a bunch of text, like, But, yeah.
Huh. It's funny.
Maybe it just signals effort. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Try searching corporate Memphis ISIS.
I did, and it's pretty funny. Yeah, I'm doing it right now. I'm doing
it.
Let's bring it up because I think I know what they're referring to. This is pretty funny. Wait, how do we expand this? This is oops. Let me see. Probably make this a little bigger, but yeah, this is like a Masonic apron of not really sure. Yeah,
I think
you
that
can
they
see
were
right
like
there.
wanting to see if like there was any ISIS like like Islamic State in
apron
Iraq,
27th
Syria,
degree GOE
like,
patriarch of ISIS Memphis Misraim. Oh my god, that's why
I feel like they were suggesting like they were trying to find out if there was any like Islamic State. I
know they did ISIS all caps, but that is basically what came up.
Yeah.
Like all the things are either ISIS statue or this Masonic apron that it seems to be. I'm not seeing any connection between corporate Memphis, the term, and the Islamic State.
Oh, you know what was kind of corporate Memphis? The solo poly hijabi that was like a meme on Twitter.
Solo poly, like bionic leg, like exactly. That was like the sort of, that's when people kind of started like sort of poking fun at the quote unquote like woke corporate Memphis, like the deployment of corporate Memphis in like activist adjacent, like liberal left wing kind of causes was the solo poly.
I don't know anything about the person who made that, but are they an activist or are they just someone who like I guess it's like awareness raising of solo poly. Although I even though I saw that meme, I'm not sure I like have retained what solo poly is, other than like being single.
I forget. It's like you're poly,
It's
but
like
you're with
single, but, like,
yourself. I think maybe
You're
or
single, but like you're open to being poly. Is that what it is?
you're spiritually poly.
Okay, here we
but-
go. It's a type of polyamorous configuration. They tend to see themselves as their own primary. They
Oh yeah,
usually
they're
have
their own
multiple
primary. They're their own
separate or
primary.
intertwined- Okay.
Which I think means like you
Interesting.
care about yourself more than your partner, kind of thing. Like I'm probably mangling the poly theory right now, but
I think but what is the poly theory beyond just like you're not monogamous? Like, is there a theory to it?
there's a theory. Yeah, like there's rules, there's
No, I
there's
don't think-
principles, there's things that they love.
They love rule. I mean, I
There's
guess you gotta
canon
have
law
rules to
about being
navigate.
poly. Yeah, no, a different terms.
Well, I guess a
and stuff.
primary partner is just like your partner who you, I want to say, like the most. Yeah, I guess maybe there are rules because you probably aren't allowed to say that you
Prioritize
like
the
your
most.
primary partner the most, but maybe the one who you're with the most.
Depends on what kind of poly you are.
Like Aisha
some
was,
maybe you are
according to
allowed.
the Sunni tradition, Aisha was Muhammad's like primary partner probably.
Okay, all right, yeah. I guess you call that poly.
And
Yeah.
well, it's polygamy.
I guess it
not-
is poly. Yeah,
Yeah.
polygamy.
Not yeah. I mean, it was polyamory. Like I mean, yeah.
It was. But yeah, I forget how we
This is
got.
open
I forget
debate,
how we
like
got
we
onto
mentioned.
poly. Oh yeah,
We're talking about the soul polygraphic.
right. I forget if that was like screenshotted from an actual like pamphlet or something, like a guide somebody had like some group had uploaded or something, and then people kind of took it and like ran with it as like
Yeah.
the peak, the example of a sort of peak vibe of kind of NGO HR type of thing. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that like what people found funny about it was like the effort to like include so many different
Right.
like intersectional demographics.
right
like, you know,
like
and-
the
yeah.
absolute like combination of like every single type of group imaginable that could be which is funny because like
And,
in,
like,
in
you
most
know.
cases corporate Memphis was used to erase
And was there even a
differences.
need to like illustrate what a solo poly person might look like? You know, like I just feel like, you know, you could just explain the concept
I
probably.
think the point was to
like-
include them as
Yeah,
somebody
okay,
you
right, I
might
guess.
have to
Probably
deal
most
with.
hijabis don't want to be included in like being like solo poly.
Probably not
like,
the term that the culture
I would imagine.
like
Yeah.
the subculture they would or they wouldn't use that subculture maybe to express it. Kind of hard to
I mean,
say.
honestly, if
I
like,
forget what it
you
was.
know, at least in the Western world, and I would imagine this might be the case elsewhere as well, although, you know, I'm not like an expert on the topic. In the Western world, I feel like the people who are pushing poly in the Muslim community are like the men, not the women. Not to say that like Muslim men, like, you know, there aren't like Muslim men who are like most, you know, like are totally fine with like, are not like, you know, trying to get that second wife, but I feel like it's you know, if that insofar as that is a thing, I feel like it's not women who are like, I want you to have a second wife, you know.
Some would say that's
I'm
there's
solo poly,
some would say
please,
they're
please.
similar in like Western secular polyculture as well. But
Yeah,
you know,
probably.
I'm sure we get
I
other
mean, there's
people yelling at
dynamics
us about
from-
how that's
Okay.
not true. That's a stereotype. But
Was the stereotype that men are like wanting to be poly and women aren't?
well, you know, the men, it's always like the guy that's like, actually, like, we should be poly, you know, because, you know, men have a tendency to be that way. And, you know, that this is sort of driven by, you know, and usually like there's sometimes you know, like a type of person in certain cities that is very, like they're the ultimate like feminist. They're so open about everything and like they're so like correct about, you know what I mean? Like they've really done the work on themselves and blah blah blah, but then like they're poly and then they, you know, like they try to tell you they almost like kind of, well, that's like your prejudice that you need to like break down. Actually, it's like polyphobic to like not like it that I want to
There's
have
a
like another
term
partner.
that I've heard that's called compersion, and that's when you that's the opposite of, I guess, jealousy. It's when you feel happy about I guess it's not like having a cuck fetish because like you're not being cut because it's like poly or whatever.
Right. It's
but
all accepted.
it's like when
Yeah.
you're happy that like your partner is happy because they're like with someone other than you. I don't know, folks.
Yeah, I don't know either, folks. I don't know either.
But you know,
Yeah,
whatever.
People can
You know,
live their
people
lives,
do
but,
all sorts of different things.
yeah.
It's fine. You know. But yeah,
I think there's
Let's
some
stop
people that make it
judging.
a kind of a whole vibe, like sort of ideology, like the world should
Yeah.
be like everybody should be like doing this because like all the problems of like monogamy cause all these problems, and if only people weren't so like
I mean,
jealous
that's
and,
obviously
like,
that's definitely not true. That like it solves problems. I think it probably like creates problems. The only thing that it
yeah.
might diminish is like people breaking up. Like it might like not cause like breakups to happen as much because you just sort of stop talking to them and you're not technically broken up because you're still together, like, but you just never see them and like you have a new primary. But I feel like eventually the breakup still has to happen. So, but I definitely don't think that it solves problems. I will say I feel like I see what you're saying, but I think probably like there's interest in it among both genders. But
Oh no, I mean for
or,
sure, obviously there
and
is,
beyond.
but
Yeah.
sometimes like it's sort of like the kind of like a male feminist type guy that'll like
Oh, there's
emphasize how
definitely
much like
such
how
people
liberating
definitely
this is for
exist.
women, but
Yeah.
like actually
Yeah.
he's the one that wants to like run around and not have to commit to anybody or something like that. That's maybe a little bit of a cynical reading of some people. I'm sure a lot of people do it with the purest of intentions. But
Yeah. All right. Well, we really like went astray here.
now we're gonna get canceled for coming at the poly.
I don't think we said
community.
anything cancelable. It's
No,
fine.
no, we're
We
fine, we're
accept
fine.
all.
We accept, yeah,
dating
yeah, no
styles
shade,
and
no shade at
all
all.
types of amory.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally cool. But yeah, I guess we can pause there for.
Although, like the opposite of poly shouldn't be monogamy. That's what people always say. It's like, oh, I'm monogamous, but like, the opposite of monogamy is polygamy. So it should be monamory, right? Like monogamous.
Well, because
is what-
polygamy is different than polyamory, and that polyamory just means like having kind
dating,
of
but
romantic
usually,
relationships
like,
with multiple people,
well,
not
for
marrying
a lot of
them
people,
per
like
se.
you still are like, oh, we're in a monogamous relationship. You still say that about someone who you're just dating. So,
Yeah.
and poly people are like monogamy is like this, like monogamy is so, but like, usually they're not really talking about marriage per se. They're talking about like people who have like one girlfriend or one boyfriend.
Right,
So they
right.
should be talking about monamory.
Getting some interesting feedback in the chats right now. I think somebody
I've been poly and you guys are right. Thank you. Okay, so
solo
now
poly, aka 27 porn tabs open at once.
All right.
All right.
I like the comment on queering heterosexuality.
Queering heterosexuality, guys. That's why McGill Clan is number one. Having just one love interest would be great. LMAO. That's also a good point. Yeah, it's like, are you a chump? Like, if you don't have at least two partners, like it becomes like a status. Does it become like a status symbol for people? Like because like, what if you just you find one person, like but maybe that's a kind of like spirit. I think there's a category of people who are like spiritually they would hypothetically be poly, but they're really just like practically speaking with one person because maybe they haven't met like the right secondary or something like that. I think there's a category.
People have many different mentalities, and I definitely think that there's more things that heaven and earth. We're a podcast that believes Bigfoot is a djinn. I do believe that there is a person out there who doesn't feel jealousy of their partner being with someone else, but I do think in most cases they do, and I don't think that's wrong. There is a little bit of that thing where it's like, oh, you're not evolved enough. Like you feel jealous of your partner. Like it's like, well, come on, guys. I can accept that. Like maybe you don't. That's fine. But I do think it's normal to do that, and I'm glad that my partner would feel jealous if I were with another woman. Like I'm happy about that, and that to me signals that like she loves me. So yeah.
And
I think that is often how love manifests. There's a concept in Islam called a ghaira, protective jealousy. It's a sign of love.
Oh, protective jealousy is a sign of love.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it can also go too far. There's this whole discourse around this, but
right.
Like, I still think that it's yeah, like I think it's
Yeah,
in most cases I feel like if you really like someone a lot or love them, you're gonna be upset if they're with somebody else. Period. But why are we talking about this? This is not,
I don't know. Yeah. Something about,
but
probably
again,
something about human nature, but yeah.
I mean, there is a reason why, like, obviously, like, polygamous cultures exist, and like polygamy is an institution in, like, different societies. But even like, in those societies, like, it is usually the case that you have like one man and one woman in a couple, or two people in a couple, let's say. And like the polygamy, even in Muslim societies, famously, you're allowed to have 4 wives in the Quran, but like that, historically speaking, the vast majority of people had one wife. The vast majority of men had one wife, and the vast majority of women had, obviously one husband, because it's not equal in this case. But
modern examples, like you could, if you wanted to go to the ultimate extreme, you could throw in like the Kingston group is like poly, like in a very specific type of. I mean, a way probably people would say, well, that's like a bad way of doing it, but that's a case where it could, but with the right combination of beliefs and things, could spiral into something that's like, yikes, you know what I mean? Like the kind of obsession with marrying like relatives and like stacking up, like kind of building your own society. Obviously, most poly people are not going to be doing that.
Well,
that's pretty
no,
extreme,
that's not. Yeah, that's an extreme. But also, like, like as we talked about in that case, like it's so extreme, it's not sustainable. Like you actually can't have like this kind of,
right. In most
society
cases,
where like there's a huge imbalance in like the. There's like not enough women, for this to actually work like on a social scale,
Right, like every guy, especially because that is hyper patriarchal, that like every man is entitled to have like as many wives, like the more wives he has.
Like, usually it's kind of like a high control group, or like that's the thing, like as I said, like in the 5th anniversary special, like the 4 wives thing in Islam is a restriction, because this goes back to our original topic, like in that context, pre-Islamic Arabia, like the elites. And that's why, the Prophet had more than 4 wives, because he was participating in that culture. He was kind of playing that role of like this, like community leader.
If you're a leader, you have multiple wives.
Like for political alliances, like you would marry like a bunch of women, and that's like, the elites would always have like many, many, many wives.
I see.
But that's like the nature, that's the nature of like this extreme, like this unrestrained. It's usually about like power, one person's power, like one person's political power,
right?
And that's kind of how it is in the Kingston situation as well,
right? And it does like bother me. It doesn't bother me maybe in other cultural contexts as much as it maybe gives me pause in today's society, which is in American society, which is so competitive and based on like money and access to like economic resources in order to like do this or that. And, I think I was just reading about, what is it, Eric Schmidt.
To answer Decoli's question of how were they able to have so many wives and they're bearing all the baby girls. Obviously, they didn't bury every baby girl, then they would have gone extinct, I guess.
Right.
Like it was a common enough practice to be remarked upon in the Quran, but obviously, in the same way that you do see like a preference for sons happening like even today in some parts of the world, and many parts of the world, like you see the exposure of infants for other reasons in the ancient or late antique world. It was the same thing. That's why so this is mentioned in the Quran as a practice that is criticized, like the like sort of exposure, or the sort of burying alive of baby girls.
Right. Oh yeah, but I was saying that I just read something the other day about how like Eric Schmidt, the ex-Google CEO, is being like sued by his like mistress, who I think is like 20, like maybe in her late 20s or something like that, and like started dating her like in her early 20s, like he's obviously in his 60s, and like kind of had like a whole separate life, and like he invested like $100 million into like her like AI startup that she like came up with and stuff like that. And I feel like that kind of poly arrangement is probably like very common among like the ultra wealthy, and like has been for almost probably forever, right? You know, like the idea of like J.P. Morgan had his mistresses and things like that. And, you know, I mean, I think that comes from more like I'm powerful and I want to have it all. Like I don't want to be denied anything. And of course, the you know, like I think the nature of the lawsuit is that he like hired private investigators to, like gang stalk her and her family when like they kind of broke off their thing. And you know, like all kinds of like shady, you know, there's like extreme power differentials and things like that. And obviously that's like an extreme end of the spectrum. But in that case, I kind of feel like, you know, like, and you know, he's one of all the Google guys go to Burning Man all the time and like get one shotted and you know do yeah, who knows what in those big, you know, the VIP orgy tent or whatever. But I don't know, like that seems like when you put it in the context of like these super powerful people and society being so competitive, you can almost see a monogamous relationship as like a bulwark against like everyone being completely out for themselves. And like I do feel like some of the arrangement, like some of the philosophies behind like this kind of a corporate Memphis version of poly that, you know, people in like cool cities like would practice is it kind of gives you license to like ditch like your partner or like deprioritize them, like it more so than if you were like monogamous, because you know, you're not like fully committed to like one person in the same way, and that can get very messy, you know, right? Like and in a society that's becoming increasingly like mercenary, and you know, people move around a lot, they're not tied to like family networks or like where they grew up or whatever. Everyone's just like a digital nomad, like mercenary floating around. It does seem almost like maybe it's like a coping strategy or like a survival strategy for this modern alienated world, that you kind of feel like you're kind of hedging your bets by having like multiple partners, and like you'll never be totally alone.
I mean, look at like how Elon, like,
right?
You know, Elon is basically like a, you know,
he's trying to be like Genghis
living
Khan,
the lifestyle of like a pre-Islamic like pagan Meccan or a polytheistic Meccan,
right? Right.
You know,
yeah.
like he is like going around, like, yeah, like I mean, I guess he's actually worse in a way because he isn't married to those women. You know,
he mails them his like sperm or something, you know, like he doesn't even, like meet them in person in most cases. Epstein was obsessed with that too.
But it is like purely
you know?
about power and purely about like this, you know, propagating his like his line and you know, his seed.
I feel like he literally read like an epic Reddit thread about how Genghis Khan, like 5% of the world has Genghis Khan's DNA because he had so many like children with like hundreds of women, and he's like amazing, and like and decided like I want to do that. You know, like I
mean, probably like if you go like people who are like, you know, lived a long time ago, like that might be the case for like a few, you know, right? Right, like the longer ago you lived, like the more likely it is that people living now have some of your DNA, right? Because there are fewer people on Earth long ago.
And yeah, like, and the world population was so much smaller back then that, and he probably did have like hundreds of children, and you know, it's like maybe in like Asia, you know, or like, you know, parts of Asia. Like they're, you know, I actually don't know how they would like actually figure out how many people have Genghis Khan's DNA, but you know, there's always like people that are like
that would be like bullshit. You know?
Probably,
I don't know. Yeah.
It's like how people used to like always say they were related to Charlemagne because he had a bunch of kids too.
Yeah,
like Europeans would kind of do that for a long time. It's like I'm actually like a descendant of Charlemagne. You know, like a lot of the, you know, Normans that moved to England.
Estimated that 16 million men alive today are Genghis Khan's direct descendants.
Damn. It does multiply every generation.
That is just the AI summary, though. Let me see. Let me look at an actual thing that a human being may have written.
I mean, it's not that many people when you think about it. Oh yeah, the Telegram app guy from Russia also has done this, where he like mailed out. I think he had a bunch of like babies, like maybe he's a sperm donor or something. Like he,
right? We
know.
don't have access to Genghis Khan's direct DNA, so
true.
It's just like
that's true. We don't have his tomb or anything.
Yeah, I don't know, like whatever, but okay.
He thinks it's real and he wants to copy it. You know, like he thinks it's real, and I guess other people are doing it too. So
but, like,
you know,
who cares? Like if your DNA is out there in the world, like what does it matter? I don't get it.
It's a little strange.
Like,
strange fixation.
I understand obviously the appeal of having a family, but I don't understand like the idea of like, oh well, as long as like my seed is like like out there in the future. Like that's the most important thing. Like I don't like what.
Well, you have to be a little bit of a eugenicist sicko, I think, to like really be obsessed with that, you know. In these days,
It's
in
kind of
these
like when
modern
these right wing
times.
people say, like, if you like marry like a black woman, like your children will be less genetically related to you than a random white person on the street or whatever. It's like, wait a minute, that's not fucking true.
That's not
Like,
true. That's
it's
not true.
like they're your own children.
They are your child. Yeah,
Like,
like that's the dumb as fuck.
they
Yeah.
do think DNA is destiny. They're obsessed with it.
Also,
But
like
it's like,
not all quote
you
unquote
know,
white people are from like the same little island
like
in
does
Northern
it
Europe.
matter? Like, does
Okay.
it mean anything? Like, practically speaking, if you like are a descendant of Genghis Khan or whatever, does that make you like like based? Like, are like it's like, yeah, like is there some kind of like special property that it has?
Then you have to get
Like,
into some, Tolkien, Game of Thrones type shit about, we're descended from dragons or whatever the fuck, and that's why they do incest, and you have to start thinking like that to think that it matters,
well, yeah, I
like the
guess the
blood.
idea of like a certain bloodline being like special is not new by any means.
I mean,
But
they call them blue bloods. I forget why. We looked it up once. Why do they call them blue bloods?
I do
Oh, is
not
it because
know.
is it because they're so fair skinned, like they're so white that like their
I feel like the
veins are
reason
blue or
I
something?
feel like that's what I thought, but I feel like the real reason was like more interesting than that. Maybe I'm wrong there. Let me see.
Blue bloods origin.
Uh,
Oh no, it's a Spanish phrase by Castilian families, sangre azul,
yeah.
used by old Castilian families to denote their pure ancestry, free from Moorish or Jewish admixture. Oh yeah, the blue likely refers to the visible blue veins of the Spanish aristocracy's
I
pale,
see.
sun-avoiding skin, which stood in contrast to those with darker, sun-exposed complexions. This entered English language in the early 19th century, and now is a common term for someone of noble or aristocratic lineage. Yeah, yeah. I remember reading some historical thing from like the True Whig Party in Liberia, where the sort of like the ruling class often had some European ancestry and said like, let our like dark skinned brothers work in the fields whilst his brother with blue veins manages the affairs from like inside in like a cool house, so that colorism thing. I guess that a lot of people
Yeah.
refer to it kind of like that. But like these people, yeah, like even going into early America, like the
In a way, like
overlapping
it
marriage of the
almost
families.
I mean, but it almost makes less sense to me. Like, I guess, like, because, like, if you are, like, a monarchy, then, like, there's a whole, like, narrative of legitimacy. Like, a whole culture is based then around that bloodline, which, like, you could obviously criticize. But, like, in a way, like, it kind of, like, makes sense, because, like, otherwise, like, what is going to be, like, the legitimating narrative? But, like, you personally, as, like, a person in, like, the contemporary United States,
Hmm.
like, do you really think that, like, your DNA is like special in some way, or that like it really matters to you if like, like how many people have your DNA like in like, several generations from now, like that in any way like keeps you alive?
I don't know if it's a keeps you alive thing,
Like I
but
understand,
I mean, it's not
yeah.
very logical, but it is a kind of an attempt to put a logical gloss on a kind of almost like mystical blood idea of that, it's just good because we're the best or something like that. But then it's kind of like, well, it's scientific because I'm successful. So it's better that my genes propagate like in the future because it's all just genes. Like it's kind of
Yeah.
adopting a Richard Dawkins kind of framework of like everything's just, genes replicating. That's like the driver behind life and like the sort of the meaning of life. That's
Is
why.
George R. R. Martin invested in like the Dire Wolf
Oh, he
revival
is in a
project?
genetic
That's
engineering.
funny. It's
Yeah,
so
yeah, he is. I saw
stupid.
that. Yeah, yeah, he's invested in some startup that I
It's just
thought I looked
like
it up.
it pisses me off so much when I think about like these people have like so much wealth and they use it on bullshit, and like the world, there's so many like problems that could theoretically be solved by like spending money, like like so many things, even like even leaving aside, as much as like as repugnant as it is to leave it aside because it's like the fundamental issue of our time, but
Hmm.
like even leaving aside the genocide in Gaza, like there are other social problems that like you could possibly direct like your billions toward, but instead it's like psychedelics, or let me bring like an extinct like wolf back, and it's not even actually the extinct wolf. It's like some like Jurassic Park like bullshit.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. No, they're not. They're definitely not investing any of that
Like,
in
honestly,
things that
how
are
dare
worthwhile.
you? Like, that, like, needs to be, like, fixed. Like, that's, like, what, like, we need, like, like, how could you even exist as, like, someone with billions of dollars, and you're spending a cent of that money on a dire wolf?
I
Not to
always
say
thought
George
the
R. R.
dire
Martin
wolf
has
was lame as
billions,
fuck.
but I mean, I'm just
Honestly,
using an
I always thought
example,
it was
I'm just using an
lame.
example.
Oh, a wolf that's
Um,
bigger. Wow, I'm amazed. Like what? Like like is it? What was there like mythology around the dire wolf? I feel like I missed something. Like why is it so cool? Well, oh, a dire wolf. I didn't even know what he was saying because of the British accent. No offense to British listeners, but like at first I was like dire wolf, like a dire wolf. Like what the fuck is that? What is this like a what Ice Ages? A big wolf or something? A mythological character? Like what? Why do people care about the fucking dire wolf so much? Why is it the coolest thing ever to them? Do you know?
I think that it's because wolves are cool, and a dire wolf is a bigger wolf, and it's like a saber-toothed tiger. Like, why is a
Okay,
saber-toothed
yeah,
tiger
it's like
cool?
a saber-toothed tiger is cooler than a dire wolf. I don't know, like why? Yeah,
Is
everyone
it?
just fucking
I
freaked
don't
out.
know. I feel like they're at least equally cool. I guess the saber-toothed tiger has a special trait of having saber teeth.
Yeah, it's
So
like
maybe
got
that's
something
cooler?
different about it than just being a bigger version of something we have today. You know what I mean? Like I don't know why they're so
Our
obsessed with it, but
ancestors
now
worked so hard to kill the megafauna. It's true. Um,
yeah, I mean I feel bad, but probably hunted them, but
yeah.
I did
The what's really cool is the ground sloth. That's the coolest one.
the ground sloth. Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
sloths are
the
cooler, like
giant
in
ground
general. I don't
sloth
know.
that they had in South America.
You see ground sloth. Oh wow, that is pretty big. It's like a bear.
Yeah, it's like a bear,
Wow,
but it's a sloth.
that's
There's
great.
actually like this like mythological creature, like this cyclopean beast that like is believed in South America. What? God, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it has one eye cryptid South America.
One-eyed cryptid.
It's oh yeah, Mapinguari. And like there's speculation that this is like kind of like an ancestral memory of like the ground sloth.
The megafauna.
Yeah,
I
like
can believe that they started going over the Bering Strait apparently, like 25,000 years ago ish.
and I think that the ground sloth wasn't like extinct until like relatively recently.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah,
those Ice Age animals. That was what the 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago.
yeah,
Not
I'm
that
not
long in
sure
the grand
exactly
span of
when.
humans. Like
Um,
relatively recent. It would be maybe
yeah,
embedded
the
in our
late
memory.
Pleistocene.
The
I
Pleistocene. Yeah.
guess the Pleistocene.
Yeah, somebody did say in the chat, lest we forget that George R. R. Martin was a big friend of Marion Zimmer Bradley and maybe her husband Walter Breen. We talked about with Jimmy Fallon Gong so long ago, and they were accused by their children of being pedos, right? Marion Zimmer Bradley and Walter Breen.
Yes,
Yes,
it
they
was. Yeah,
part of that Berkeley sci-fi fantasy scene.
right.
So
She at least like no, yeah, she was also accused of sexual abuse. Yeah.
right, and then Walter
Yeah.
Breen was involved in the Gifted Children programs, right? With
Yeah.
Jack Sarfati. Yeah. So he's known some he's been friends with some sus people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
there you go. Yeah, I guess we can I don't know. I don't know if there's any
Yeah, I
more.
guess we'll
I don't know
leave it
where we
there.
got onto like sloths and megafauna from, but
We were
but
talking about how George R. R. Martin, like, apparently was tied to that direwolf revival project.
yeah, he's invested in a corporate, like some kind of biotech startup that is allegedly. Let me see. I was reading about it here. He says he's a lapsed Catholic. Oh my God! Wait, he supported Talk about corporate Memphis. Martin has also supported Meow Wolf, an arts collective in Santa Fe, having pledged $2.7 million. Meow Wolf is like the ultimate, like, it's almost like corporate Memphis in three directions. It's like the ultimate, like, hype beast immersive art installation that is like Instagrammable. I feel like they took over a big chunk of like Las Vegas or something, but it's sort of like synonymous with like trashy like hype beast art, kind of thing. Oh yeah, they have Omega Mart in the Area 15 in Las Vegas, and the Real Unreal. I guess he loves this goofy Meow Wolf whatever thing. He had to give them millions of dollars. Colossal Biosciences. That's what it is. A biotechnology and genetic engineering company working to de-extinct several animals, including the woolly mammoth, the Tasmanian tiger, the northern white rhinoceros, the dire wolf, the dodo, and the moa. In 2023, it stated it wants to have...
bringing back the moa?
Like, what was the moa?
Wasn't that like a horse-eating bird? Like, didn't that like kill humans?
It's kind of like an ostrich.
Like, wasn't that like... Yeah, it's like...
it's kind of like a gigantic ostrich that would be a 12-foot tall kind of a emu or ostrich.
I feel like that was like, menacing people like in Australia and New Zealand, like giant moa.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, we do still have, ostriches and emus. But
why don't we like try to not like, that's the thing. I almost feel like all this stuff is just like, oh well, it doesn't matter because like we can always, if we make them all go extinct, we can always bring them back and have like 3 of them in a little zoo for our amusement. Like, how about we focus on like not causing more animals to go extinct rather than bringing back like charismatic animals? Like what, like, why don't we like focus on like bringing back like the wolves that like we basically wiped out, like the normal wolves. Like,
right.
They are like have been decimated. So why do we need to like bring back these like and do a photo op with George R.R. Martin like for some sus company that probably like that's all a front for like some kind of like weird like transhumanist goal they ultimately have. Where,
I feel like that's
like, oh, we brought back the dire wolf. Now we can like like clone you and like implant your brain into a clone of yourself and like. It's sus. I don't like it. Like, like fuck all this stuff. Why can't we just? Why can't people just spend their money on like solving the imminent problems that exist now? Like whatever.
Well,
anyway, I'm getting tired.
They're gonna create a mystery religion and psyop everybody instead.
Exactly. Like
while the world burns.
Epic if this is like the sort of like Marvelification of like the universe where it's
wow.
Like, well, yeah, sure, we could like actually be like involved in conservation efforts, but like, wouldn't it be more epic if we brought back the saber-toothed tiger and we brought back the dire wolf from the epic hit TV show Game of Thrones? And here's a picture of George R.R. Martin like not working on his book, but he's got a dire wolf cradled in his arms. It's like, well, is this even a dire wolf? No, it's just like some bullshit photo op that you put together. Like, why don't you spend this money on something valuable for the world?
These were actually they in 2025 they announced that they had like created embryos for dire wolves and like birthed them, but then everyone basically said that they were not dire wolves. They're basically gray wolves with 20 edits, and not truly dire wolves. So even that is like kind of fake hype. They also, one of their first investors was guru Tony Robbins, like the self-help guy, which is sus.
Like, but why would anyone give money to this anyway?
Right. Well, Ben Lamb and George Church are George Church looks like a scary like scientist, like serious scientist who gets hired to do scary things a little bit, but Phillips Andover, interesting background for a guy who wants to do like eugenics shit. Oh wait, guess who funded George McDonald Church, the like founder of this company from 2005 to 2007? Take a wild guess. Who funded him?
Jeffrey Epstein?
It would be the nonprofit Jeffrey Epstein 6 Foundation. I guess that's like VI, Jeffrey Epstein VI Foundation.
I guess they are like also like trying to apply this to like recover like the red wolf, which is like a less insane goal, but at the same time, like
funded by Jeffrey Epstein guy who's like doing Jurassic Park shit. A church also collaborated with transhumanist entrepreneur James Clement on the supercentenarian research study, which aims to sequence the genomes of supercentenarians in hopes of discovering potential genetic factors behind their longevity. Yikes. And he's also, as of 2023, part of the Enhanced Games Scientific and Ethical Advisory Commission. I'm pretty sure that's the like Peter Thiel-backed alternative to the Olympics, where people are allowed to like juice and like do as many steroids as they want. To like, it's like a transhumanist like optimized Olympics with no rules, basically. It's only been proposed such far. So far.
This is what George R. R. Martin says. Like, dire wolves are special to me. Why? Damned if I know. As a kid, I was not even allowed to have a dog, let alone a wolf. But I visited the La Brea tar pits in LA a few decades back, and when I saw their dire wolf exhibit, 400 skull arrayed on a wall, something stirred inside me. Most of my readers will have heard the story of how I was writing a science fiction novel in the summer of 1991 when a scene came to me, the first chapter of Game of Thrones, where they find the direwolf pups in the summer snows. Where did that come from? Why did it seize me so powerfully? I have no idea, but it grabbed hold of me so hard that I put the other novel aside and began to write A Song of Ice and Fire. The direwolves were a huge part of it. Without them, Westeros might not exist.
Oh,
Maybe
my
I was
God.
remembering a past life when I ran with a pack in the Ice Age.
Okay, so maybe that's why everybody, all the fanboys, just like squealed when like the direwolf showed up in Game of Thrones, because it was like the epic moment when like the direwolf shows up because it's so important to him and whatever.
I guess. Well,
But
I
it wouldn't
don't
be
know.
Game of Thrones.
I feel like it was just epic because it's a big wolf, but it's funny that like he's like, well, maybe I was like an ancient man who like lived with dire wolves, and like I'm actually the Pharaoh of Atlantis. Like, why? Like, just stop it. Like, you're not the Pharaoh of Atlantis.
No,
you're like a
you
normal
work for a
person.
company
You
that is
happen to have
funded by
$1 million.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Like, I mean, like again, like I think like animal conservation efforts like are like not bad. I think it's like a shame that like human beings have like been such poor custodians of the planet.
Of course.
You know, and like destroyed many species. But at the same time, like, you know, and I understand that like animals that people find charismatic like are used to like mobilize
Right,
people
right.
to care about, you know, the
Free
earth.
Willy,
But
etc.
I also feel like, give me a break. Like, just like, you know.
It's the Epstein money for me, pretty much, that makes me call their motivations into and the probably likely Peter Thiel connections,
exactly. Yeah.
and the transhumanism lurking beneath the surface of all of this. Like, they're not just doing it for the welfare of like animals; they're trying to, you know, do with transhumanism. Like, basically, they want to live forever. That's what they're trying to do with it here, I think. And they want, like, you know,
And it's also like a license to be like, we don't have to like take care of like this. You know, we don't have to preserve this part of nature because like if we kill these animals, we can always bring it back.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, same with maybe humanity. We could just, you know, print people after a while, and if we die in a nuclear war, it's fine. Like, you know, it's not good. It's not good.
Don't like it. Simple as
yeah,
you
it's
know,
not good.
Conservation, sure. Dire wolf, like Jurassic Park crap, like it's vain. It's like just it's not like where our efforts need to be directed, in my view.
Right.
Anyway, on that note,
on that note, I'll just leave you with a fun thing that company was also hatched out of the Weiss Institute for Biologically Inspired Engineering, which is at Harvard, and named after, I believe, the Swiss billionaire businessman Hans-Jörg Weiss, who is made like medical like implants or something, and like made a bunch of money, but who I remember from the John Podesta emails, like making some kind of reference to like sex crimes charges, because he got either charged or sued for like kind of Me Too things. And I don't know if he was connected to like Epstein properly or something like that, but it seemed like it was a thing. Oh, everybody knew about that. He did something bad. I'm trying to find here, personal life. Wow, they might have wiped. Oh yeah. Another in 2025 and in 2013, he had to pay a former foundation staff member $1.5 million after she accused him of sexual abuse. So just more of that Game of Thrones shit happening. But yeah, so right from there down to George R. R. Martin, and then a bunch of transhumanists making direwolves and being sus. So yeah, we'll leave it there. I guess we'll be back on Monday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. and then back on our Monday, Thursday schedule for any who don't know. And I will upload this audio to the RSS feed, never fear. And yeah, we'll catch y'all then. But until then, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.